Good evening. That's a great response. Thanks. We're going to go ahead and reconvene the public session. John, will you give us a report of actions taken in closed session?
Sure. The City Council considered the matters listed on the closed session agenda, and there are no reportable actions.
Thank you. We'll now please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance by Council Member Ted Hoffman and the Invocation by Pastor Renee Parrish.
Join me and stand if you're able.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bow your head with me in prayer. Lord, in Psalm 61, it says, "Hear my cry, O Lord. Attend unto my plea. From the ends of the earth does my heart cry out to thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Lord, our heart has been overwhelmed by what we have witnessed and seen over these so many weeks, and we cry out, Lord, for the people and the nation of the Ukraine. Lord, we ask, Father, that you would, God, Lord, reveal your mercy and your grace to them at the time of their greatest need as evil so rapidly advances against them, Father, and Lord, their cause for freedom. And Father, the community in the city of Norco, God, the citizens, we stand with them in that, Lord, love of freedom, Lord, and we are so grateful that we can come together in this forum and in this place to voice, God, Lord, our concerns, Lord, our support, even our differences without any fear of recrimination. Lord, God, to know, Lord, that we have been able to do this. And so, Lord, we pray for them. We pray for our city, we pray for our community and our citizens, and for this council, that you would grace each one of our members, Lord, and all of our citizens with your prosperity, God, with your blessing, and with your wisdom and your direction. In the name of our Lord Jesus, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Renee. I'm going to call upon Councilmember Hoffman to present the Community Spirit Award to Jerry and Shelley Lundy.
Come on around here so people can see you. Nothing.
Yep.
All right. Excuse me as I move this thing. It's my pleasure and privilege. Shelley and Jerry have been doing something up at our park for over 10 years. And since then, they have educated and trained and helped young people here in our town with barrel racing, team roping, team sorting. And they will put these on up there as part of an educational program through our city, which has been probably very inspiring if you've been up there on a Thursday evening and you see all these young ladies up there and some young men learning how to barrel race and doing it right. And some of the professionals come up there and practice. But what's really inspired me about what Shelley and Jerry have done is a couple years ago they turned into making their annual team roping and barrel race, which is 3 days, been almost 4 days of up there of barrel racing and team roping on Saturday, into a breast cancer awareness. Shelley is a survivor, breast cancer survivor, and so she's not only what they have done inspired up there, and she's part of the Support Sisters here in town that was started by I see some. And Pat's in here from it. So this gives an opportunity for the ladies up there, especially the barrel racers. You see them up there. They've got their pink ribbons and they've got their pink flags. And the guys even wear pink up there. And a lot of awareness up there and a support for the ladies here in town and throughout the community, especially the barrel racing in our cowboy community. So with that, and without further ado, I would like to present the Norco City Council applauds and embody for applaud you for embodying the spirit of Norco, and to Jerry and Shelley Lindy. And you guys, thank you very much for all you do. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. All right. You got a picture? You got your picture. Who's got the camera now? Was one of the top lady workers up there in Vegas.
Congratulations again. Like my colleagues to join me at the podium, we're going to make a proclamation and celebrate Women's History Month 2022.
Trying to trip me. All right. I was designated by the mayor to do the Women's History Month presentation this evening. So tonight we are recognizing March as Women's History Month by presenting a proclamation to female community members who have contributed to the economic, cultural, spiritual, and/or political development of our city. Well, Audrey Pavia, Pat Overstreet, Brianna Hurd, and Cassandra Sanders-Hawley's representative. Please join us at the podium to receive the proclamations. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation, and then we'll have each of them say a few words if they would like. All right. So whereas in 1978, the Education Task Force of the Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women planned and executed a Women's History Week to commemorate and encourage the study, observance, and celebration of the vital role of women in American history. And whereas in 1980, President Jimmy Carter declared the week of March 8th as National Women's History Week, stating, "The achievements, leadership, courage, strength, and love of the women who built America was as vital as that of the men whose names we all know so well." And whereas in 1987, Congress passed Public Law 100-9, designating March as Women's History Month, and whereas since 1995, every American president has designated March as Women's History Month and endorsed a specific theme, and whereas the 2022 theme proudly honors women who, both in public and private life, provide healing and promote hope for the betterment of all. And whereas the City of Norco recognizes its local women's history and reflects on the strides we have made to ensure all citizens feel accepted and included. And whereas the City of Norco is a diverse community that is honored to celebrate the history and legacies of women who have contributed to the economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development of our city, state, and country. Now, therefore, I, Greg Newton, but really Robin, Mayor of the City of Norco, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2022 as Women's History Month in the City of Norco, where all citizens, past, present, and future, are respected and recognized for their contributions to our community. So, if any of our women's representatives for the community would like to say something, we'd be happy to have you share a few words.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Audrey Pavia. I'm honored to be a resident of Norco for the last 19 years. I have 2 horses, one of whom I raised here. He's super bomb-proof, as you can imagine. Grew up in Norco. And I want to thank the city and the city council and the mayor for this. Is great. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It is a great honor. I am honored to receive this along with these other great ladies. This is going to be news to my husband because he's always thought I was hysterical. And when he finds I'm historical, he's going to be surprised. So thank you again. You all know I love this town and been here 44 years. That's over half of my life. And I want us to keep on going. So I'm depending on all of you. So thank you very much.
So now it's picture time if you guys want to come in the front right here.
Go between the shoulders.
If anything, I'd like to add, as a veterans committee and women in our community and throughout the world, this year, on March 29th, will be 49 years since the end of the Vietnam War. And I'd like to add that there are 8 women on that wall, the Vietnam Memorial, 8 women out of the 1,000. So it's important that we remember them too. Thank you.
I'm going to call on the city clerk before we move into city council reports on regional boards. Dana?
I gave my notice to you. It's okay. I just wanted to go ahead and bring this up tonight. You will see that on the dais, each one of the council members does have an iPad. We have gone to our new agenda management system that you see up on the screen now, and they all will be using their iPads to be voting. And the iPads are now not just for them. I know some people see iPads on a dais and think, oh, why are the council members, playing with their phone, playing with their iPad? But I want to let you know that I have issued these. I have trained them with them because this is our agenda management system that is more efficient, reduces our paper. It's also more flexible. We can actually have a city council meeting in an emergency anywhere because now they can vote directly from there. It'll be projected on a screen or on my computer or online. So if we have to move it to Nellie Weaver Hall, we have to move to the parking lot, we can have a meeting and you can see the transparency of the voting right in front of you. Now, they won't need their phones on the dais to do city business. They can do it all through their iPad. And this is just giving away between our new website that we have up along with our new systems here. This is just, letting you know that I'm trying to make sure that Norco is the most transparent it can be. If you have any questions or concerns or you'd like more information about what we're doing with the iPads, feel free to call my office. My door is always open and I'll be happy to discuss it further with you. So thank you tonight and be patient because this is our first night we've rolled this out and we hope it goes well. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Dana. I'd like to call upon Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer to start council communications.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Good report, Robin.
On March 8th, I attended the California Rehabilitation Center Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, also with Councilmember Bash, who I think will elaborate a little more on that. And on March 14th, I attended the Southern California Association of Governments Riverside County Housing Policy Leadership Academy. Thank you.
I attended a lot of things. I did attend the CRC meeting, and the new warden seems to be really fitting in nicely. They gave away $32,000 last year to different charities, so get your hand out. They're giving away money over there. What I would like to do has nothing to do with the meetings that I attended. A lot of people know that we are a Navy town, not just Horsetown, USA. And we became a Navy town when the United States government, actually President Roosevelt, purchased the old Norconian Resort, the only time in the entire war that they bought a piece of property and converted it into a Navy General Hospital. It's the only time. But something happened on May 18th, 1947, in which a group of men that we had just sort of thrown into the trash, laid in beds. That was the therapy for paraplegics, and essentially it was a death sentence. And some doctor named Dr. Gray said, you know, he was a plastic surgeon, and what happens is when you lay in a bed, they kind of flip you, and you literally rot in that bed. And so what they do is they cut away flesh, and then they take flesh off of your arm and try to save your life. Well, Dr. Gray flew all the way to Washington. He says, we got to get him out of these beds. And they said, are you crazy? They might get hurt. So a new gymnasium had been built, and they took these men out of beds, and they gave them a basketball and let them play basketball. People thought, wow, that's incredible. But this was the site of the Navy's only paraplegic treatment ward, literally in the entire United States. A nurse who wrote a book later called A Navy Nurse Remembers said they suddenly became men again. And I've met several of these players. There's one left who's still living, but on that date, the first game in history between two organized teams took place here in Norco, and that gym is still there. And one of the things that makes me angry is that it took 15 years, literally, for the Navy historians to admit that game took place. It took place, and it wasn't until the National Basketball Association Hall of Fame put their picture in their Hall of Fame, and the National Wheelchair Basketball Association acknowledged the game, that they finally said, yeah, we guess that game took place, but it's not all that important. It was important. Today, we truthfully take for granted the access that wheelchair users have. But imagine in 1947, you didn't have access. There were no ramps. There were no doors. There was no access whatsoever. And that game not only became the game that launched the most popular paraplegic sport in the world, it launched an entire civil rights movement. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about the fact that here in Norco, May 18th, 1947, 75 years ago, that game took place. And to honor that, I'm really proud of the fact that our city has a wheelchair. The team that was here in Norco was called the Rolling Devils, and we actually have a tournament in their honor. And we try every year to actually play a game between the San Diego Naval Hospital and one of the VA hospitals. Wheelchair users, teams, actually play on the original floor for the incarcerated members of our community. And you would think that was the NBA Finals. But we have a great time, and we're probably the only people that are remembering this event in this room, and I just don't want to forget it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin. Ted?
I'm like Kevin, I travel around, get busy. Basically, I'm going to talk about the Veterans Memorial Executive Committee meeting. You know, we've gone through pandemic. We've gone through the shortages and transportation, and I just can't get our monument from the East Coast to the West Coast. It's just very frustrating. We've pushed this thing back so much, and now finally, and I hate to say this, Michelle, we're going to cross our fingers, and we're going to say we're going to have a opening on that thing on June 12th. That's what started when we were supposed to have it back in September, then December, and then April, and it'll be there. But that's the Gold Star Family Monument. So just please put that on your calendar, put it in pencil, because I don't know if it changed or not. But that's the big thing coming out of the Veterans Committee. We're trying. We're really trying. But as I said earlier, as far as our veterans, I want you to remember that March 20th, Medal of Honor Day, where we recognize all those people. We have one, George Ingalls. So we'll be putting some flags up there at the Veterans Memorial. The gates will be open if you want to take your time up there and pay your respects. On March 29th, we'll probably be doing a virtual ceremony, but we'll put the flags up. The plaza will be open again to recognize our Vietnam veterans up there on that day. And then coming down later on, as far as with Horse Week, I would just put it on your calendar. April 16th, I know it's the first Saturday of Horse Week, but we will be recognizing George Ingalls up during the memorial, up during the rodeo up there. And then I put a press release out. I know some copies out there regarding the RTA awarded federal grant that occurred, that the hydrogen fuel cell electric bus fleet, they got a bunch of money from the feds for that. That's a good thing. And then for those of you that travel the Interstate 15 and get stuck in that mess south of Corona, it's a lot of money, but for 3 years, hopefully this will be done in the next 4 months. They'll have the it finished, the extra lanes, so we can cut down some of that congestion as it goes down from the 5 lanes down to 3 lanes right by Dos Lagos. Hopefully that'll fix. So, and the good thing is, yesterday Dana showed us how to use these things, and Dana, it's going to be a real test. I'm a paper guy, but we'll get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. I had no regional meetings this last few weeks, but since we have a full house, I do want to remind everybody that Saturday, March 26th, we have our community cleanup and paper shredding event, and it's free. Chad, do you have any other comments to that? Please clean up your yards, clean up your houses. He'll unload your truck for you. It's the best deal in town.
He doesn't do it anymore. He has Sam do it.
Just 8 to 12. You can come back as many times as you want. Just make sure you load it in your own vehicle. You can't bring trailers.
Thank you, Chad. We'll move into the consent calendar and call upon the city clerk once again.
All items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted by one motion. Prior to the motion to consider any action by the presiding governmental body, any public comments on any of the consent items will be heard. There will be no separate actions unless members of the governmental body or the audience request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar. Items removed from the consent calendar will be separately considered under item 3 of the agenda.
Thank you, Dana. Does any council member wish to pull any items?
F is in Frank, please.
F?
F is in Frank, yes.
Do we have any public comments?
We have no public comments, Mayor.
Okay. I'll ask for a motion to approve the remaining items.
Second.
This will be our first vote on these iPads, so Matt in the back is voting also, so.
His didn't pop up.
That was in green.
Yes.
I'm green. It's because I'm at the end and the signal got weaker. Check your in check. I'm good.
Not coming up. Okay. Okay. Councilmember Hoffman, I can go ahead and take your vote, and then we'll come and look at yours. Okay, that's an aye. And the motion passes.
Okay, Dana?
Yep.
All right, Ted, item F.
Yeah, and Chad and I had the conversation about the bids and making sure that it's a slurry, and what they're gonna do is where you see that pavement over there, and Chad, they're actually not only gonna slurry the road, they're also gonna repair that section that's alligatored out, correct? Okay. When I was there today and driving through, I noticed that Nova, which are doing a good job on putting the landscape in there and everything. My concern is that our contractor doesn't mess that all up. We just spent a lot of money on that irrigation and that. So are we going to have supervision out there on that?
Yeah, certainly the inspector will be out there, but since they're only doing a slurry in half that section, the other half is a grind and overlay, they're not going into the parkway, so there should be no impacts onto what Nova has done in the parkway.
Okay, I just want to make sure we just spent a lot of money on that, and because then boom, here comes these guys, and it's not their deal, but I just want to make sure we're protecting what we have.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve.
And for the audience, this was referring to the Norco Hills Road Improvement Project. So we have a motion and a second.
Councilmember Hoffman,
Yes.
the motion carries.
Thank you. We'll now go into public comments.
This is a time when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding matters not on the agenda may be heard. Please submit a speaker card to the meeting clerk. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the governmental body's ability to respond to comments on non-agendized matters. At the time such comments are made, the governmental body shall not discuss or act relative to any general public comment. The first speaker is Holly McMillan.
Hi, Holly.
Hello.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. First of all, thank you to the City Council for this opportunity to speak. We are all very much aware of the situation in Ukraine. Last week, the Ukrainian Equestrian Federation put out a call for help for the horses that have been stranded in Ukraine as their owners fled for their lives and have become refugees. I have been working with them to create a Norco Horsetown, USA, Ukraine veterinary supply drive. And I'm here tonight to bring this to the public's attention, to your attention. We have Mies Shipping, a Ukrainian family-owned shipping company in Glendale, California, who is offering to ship for free medical veterinary supplies to the Ukraine. They are supporting the Ukrainian Cultural Center and all the things that they are sending for humanitarian relief. Yesterday, in true Norco spirit, I reached out and asked for donations to get on the flight to Ukraine for Friday. And I have to say, Marilyn Gersha, who put this together, getting us this free shipping, Dr. Bryn Moser, Inland Valley Vet, Tony's Handgrain, Linda's Feed, Hay Connection, Vivi's Feed, Tractor Supply, and Thrifty Horse. We are sending approximately 200 pounds of veterinary medical aid to the Ukraine. We can continue this for the near future, and I would like to hopefully get some support and advertisement maybe from the city. We will be doing donation boxes at many of these locations and others, social media and things like that. Oh, the timer. The other thing I'd like to say is I've never, ever once in all the time I've been in Norco and the different drives and things I've done, asked for any monetary donations. But speaking with the Meest family, whose members are in the Ukraine, who are doing this, I would like to put something together fund-wise to help support them for what they are doing. Not just for us to help Ukraine horses, but for everyone in Southern California that they are shipping things to Ukraine for relief. And that is all that I have. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Oh, and all of these things will be going to Lviv, Ukraine, to be dispersed to veterinarians, the evacuation barns, and the shelters. Thank you.
Our
Thank you.
next,
How'd I do?
Good job.
next speaker is Pat Hedges.
Good evening, Patricia.
Good evening, group. I'm always more nervous on this side than that side. I don't know why. Probably because I'm not here very often. I've been meaning to come for some time, but it worked out good because it's Women's History Month. I'm here to talk about Kathy Azevedo's memorial. She is a woman I know that's done more for Norco than any other woman. And on August 2019, the city had the meeting up at the Veterans Park, and the memorial idea was unveiled. May 2021, Kathy died, so it's almost been a year now. But nothing has been done. I went up to Ingalls. I met a couple people up there, workers, and they said, oh, nothing's being done. And then they said, I think it's moved to the other side. So then I talked to staff, and staff told me, well, it's because Brian left. It's been 2.5 years. Then the other argument was, well, they're starting the drawing. So I'm perplexed why it hasn't been done. I know that you could say COVID, but we've had, and nothing against veterans, but we've had veterans things taken care of during this time, but Kathy still isn't. I know Danny told me that $100,000 was given by the Egg Ranch developer specifically for Kathy's memorial. Still, nothing's been done. We've had memorials for other city council members. Malcolm has a trail marker. Hal Clark has an arena. Frank Hall has a library. Berwin has a bridge. But nothing is done, and I'm not sure why. And I don't want to say it's because she's a woman, but I'm going to say it. These are all men had things, but a woman doesn't have anything. It's Women's History Month. So my idea is, first of all, let's get it built. Second of all, how about when you vote on the barn, name that after Kathy? I mean, she was Horsetown USA through and through. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Michelle, will you make sure we get a current update?
We have no further public comment, Mayor.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, let's move into discussion and action items. And Dana, I'm going to call upon you once again.
No problem. Order of presentation for discussion items. Number 1, staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. 3, public comment. 4, council discussion and action.
Thank you. We're now going to have the Sheriff's Department Annual Report presentation for 2021. Good evening, Lieutenant.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. It is my pleasure to have served as your police chief since January of 2021. And this evening I will be presenting the 2021, I never speak into the mic, do I? Do my best here. I'll be presenting the 2021 Norco Sheriff's Office Annual Report. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department is honored to provide the City of Norco law enforcement services, and as all of you know, the City of Norco was the first municipality to contract law enforcement services with the Sheriff's Department. Today in Riverside County, we have 16 different contract cities. In this presentation, I'm going to provide an overview of the services provided in 2021, the reportable Part 1 crimes, as well as the traffic statistics. So the Norco Sheriff's Office is made up of myself, a dedicated lieutenant. We have an executive secretary who is retiring next month, so we're in search of a new one. I think we found one, so I think we'll be happy with our new pick. And we have a part-time city CSO that works the lobby. So the lobby's open from 10 to 2 Monday through Thursday. And if anybody is interested, you can come in and talk to Bill, and he can help you out with your needs. We have 2 patrol sergeants that are supported sergeants from the Harupa Valley Station that are assigned to the Norco Sheriff's Office. Patrol operations are 24/7. We have 48 patrol hours a day, which is essentially 8 deputy sheriffs assigned to patrol, so that would be 2 deputies per shift, day shift and graveyard. Traffic enforcement, 2 dedicated deputies and 3 special enforcement team deputies, which you guys know we recently changed, so next year we'll have a little bit different makeup. But as far as 2021 goes, we still had the 2 dedicated traffic deputies and the 3 dedicated set team deputies. And we still have 4 non-sworn CSOs. This slide just kind of shows the daily staffing levels and where everybody's coming in at, so you can see that we kind of peak during the midweek and then draw down Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We have over 250 years of combined experience with the sworn personnel at the Norco Sheriff's Office. 6 of those are field training officers. We have 17 marked sheriff units. We have 3 unmarked vehicles. We have a mobile command post, a off-road UTV Polaris vehicle. We have 2 bicycles, and we have 3 Norco Citizen Patrol vehicles. In addition to that, additional equipment that we have are mobile field force equipment that are assigned to the deputies and less lethal munitions such as like the 40 millimeter launcher and pepper ball launchers. This is a slide that I've added from the last presentation to kind of help break down what the crimes or how the crimes are prioritized at dispatch. So when you call in dispatch, you tell them what's going on. They're going to prioritize your call either 1 through 4, 1 being the highest priority, 4 being the lowest priority. And so these are just it's kind of a summary definition of how dispatch is assigning these priorities. So a part 1 or a priority 1 call involves circumstances that pose a clearly defined threat to human life or property in which a high level of violence is present. Priority 2 is just a call that is urgent but not life-threatening. Priority 3 is circumstances are neither urgent or life-threatening, and most calls are kind of lumped into the priority 4 category. So that'll kind of help with some of the next slides when we're talking about priorities and response times. So in 2021, our total calls for service were 9,027 calls. So those are just calls from the community into dispatch. That does not count self-generated file numbers that are pulled for proactive traffic enforcement or arrest or that nature. So these are just calls into dispatch. That's actually a 3.1% decrease from 2020, where we had 9,322 calls. Overall response times actually increased by 9.4%, and this average is based on the priority 1 through 4 calls. So in 2021, we were at a 25-minute average for response time compared to 23 minutes in 2020. And just to break it down by actual priorities, priority 1 is about 5.1 minute wait, 15.9 minutes for a priority 2, 28 minutes for a priority 3, and 39 minutes for a priority 4. So the part 1 crimes, or the UCR crimes that we call them, these are the statistics that are sent to the FBI for the FBI annual report, where they compare crime stats nationwide. You're going to see in these current crime stats that we essentially saw an increase in every category. So 2021, we had 639 total part 1 crimes compared to 602 in 2020, which is a 6.1% increase. When you break it down into property crimes, so I guess I should back up. So the part 1 crimes are made up of Murders, rapes, robberies, assaults, burglaries, larceny thefts, vehicle thefts, and arsons. And so when we break it down into the property crime section, we had a total of 580 compared to 2020, which was 564, so an increase of 2.8%. In violent crimes, we actually saw a 55% increase from 38 in 2020 to 59 in 2021. And this is just kind of like a 5-year overview. So when you look at those numbers, they look like they've really spiked, but what we're really seeing is us just coming out of the pre-pandemic era, right? So the 2021 numbers are still much lower or comparable to 16, 17, 18, or 19. So if you take out the 2020, 2021 pandemic numbers, we're still on a downward trend from where we were in 2016. So even though the numbers look high, it's still a positive as far as I'm concerned. What we've seen is a continued increased proactivity from our deputies. The deputies continue to handle their own investigation and close out their own calls. If you remember previously, most station deputies at Harupa Valley will take an initial report, and then they'll send that to the detective bureau, where a detective will be assigned that case, and they'll do the follow-up. So in Norco, we operate a little bit differently. Our special enforcement team deputies act as our detectives here, so they're taking most of the property crimes and doing their own follow-up. Serious crimes, violent crimes are still going to go to the detective bureau, but the property crimes we handle mostly in-house, which means they're not being stuck on top of a huge caseload of a detective's desk in Harupa Valley. So we have a better turnaround time and a better arrest outcome with those. And so the number that I really think is impressive is our arrests have increased by 70%. We had 780 total arrests, so that includes all misdemeanors and felonies to include cites. So as you know, with the changes in the laws, a lot of our arrests are just citations issued now, but the deputies have been very proactive. They're making arrests, and they're either booking people in or citing them out for whatever crime they've been accused of. So we've seen a pretty significant increase in proactivity and arrest. One of the other exciting things that I want to report tonight is the use of our automated license plate reader camera. So back in February of 2021, City Council approved the purchase and use of these cameras. In April, they were installed at various locations throughout the city, and this really was a tool that was immediately proving to be successful for us. So we've solved a bunch of stolen vehicle cases, vehicle burglaries, robberies, a kidnapping and indecent exposure, grand thefts, and petty thefts, resulting in 33 felony arrests and 2 misdemeanor arrests. And we've recovered over $550,000 in stolen vehicles and personal property. So it was really a great investment. It's been a great tool for us, and the county, as most of you have also gone to the same ALPR that we're using in the city. So all the surrounding unincorporated county areas are using the same system. So it's kind of a bigger network for us, and it's actually taken our numbers down, because some of these cars that are going through the system and getting picked up are now getting picked up in other areas, where before there was no cameras in the county area. So it was just Norco that was kind of picking them up. So we're seeing the arrests kind of spread out a little bit more. In 2021, we had 10 OTS-funded traffic operations. That was 2 DUI checkpoints, 5 DUI saturation operations, 2 speed enforcement operations, and 1 distracted driver operation. And as you know, the funding from OTS is down significantly from years past. So 5 years ago, we were doing 12 DUI checkpoints a year. The money is just not there like it used to be, so we did 2 last year, and we're actually going to probably be doing 1 DUI checkpoint in 2022. Traffic citations, we wrote 2,471 in 2021 compared to 2344 in 2020, so a small increase of 5.4%. And then the parking citations actually decreased a little bit from 1174 in 2020 to 1132 in 2021. Traffic collisions have also increased in every category. So we had 538 total traffic collisions, 17% increase from 2020 where we had 456. The non-injury traffic collisions were at 471, a 16% increase. Non-injury hit and run collisions increased 36% to 152 from 111 in 2020. We had 67 injury collisions compared to 51 in 2020 for a 31% increase. And we had 2 fatal traffic collisions, which is a 100% increase from 2020 where we had 1. And again, these numbers are really just comparable to the pre-pandemic numbers. So we're seeing an increase in every area, but it's just kind of getting back to where we were averaging prior. This is just a 5-year overview of our traffic, so you can see that we're still a lot lower than previous years. It's just startling when you see these numbers because they're big increases. We started back up with some of the community outreach programs that we were running. I know during the pandemic it was almost down to nothing. We had a Coffee with a Cop event and a Trunk or Treat event. Both were very attended very well and pretty successful. I know the Trunk or Treat event was a huge turnout. We had to go for another run on the store to pick up some more candy in mid-event, so we wiped out a couple grocery stores. Volunteer forces, we're still having some lingering effects from the pandemic. Our citizens on patrol numbers are down to 13, so they were 15 last year, and I believe it was 17 or 18 the year before, so we're seeing a decline in our numbers. Volunteer hours are still significantly down, so we had 1,582 volunteer hours worked in 2021, which was down from 2,074 in 2020. And Bill Wozniak, our chaplain. So our goals and objectives for 2022, we want to continue our increased traffic enforcement. We are adding some traffic deputies, so we added the 3rd deputy in January, and we are hoping to add the 4th by the fiscal year or near the fiscal year. We want to continue the increased proactive policing, continue with the increased follow-up investigation and case closure within Norco. We want to continue the career development through training for the deputies, expertise development. We really want to ramp up the community outreach this year and our volunteer recruitment. And with that, I will answer any questions you have.
Good report, Justin.
Thank
you. Robin? Ted?
Yeah, one real quick. You said the other our surrounding agencies or cities are getting the same system we have on the ALPRs. Has Eastville changed over theirs? Do you know of?
They have not.
So they're still the one using the old system?
Yes.
Okay. And
I believe they have one camera that they're testing, but they're locked into a contract, I'm told, so we don't know which direction they're going to go when that's up, but there's quite a few cameras in all the surrounding county areas, and then I don't have a list off the top of my head of all the municipalities or cities, but there's quite a few of them out there now.
Okay, I'm just curious if they ever changed over. Thank you.
They have not.
Thank you, Ted. Catherine?
Couple questions. So with our new traffic deputy, the ticket numbers should go up, right?
For
Traffic tickets.
for this year?
Well, start a little bit, and then next year we should expect to see more.
So we're hoping that 2022 we're going to see an increase in our citations. So you would think that in 2021, even though we added the 2nd deputy full time, and so the reason that the numbers aren't really increasing is because prior to having the 2 full-time deputies, we had a lot more OTS money, and then the city actually funded traffic operations. So there was times where we didn't have any OTS money, and so the city was funding essentially backfilling that money to do the DUI saturations and the distracted driver operations. And so with all the extra money available for overtime, we actually had a lot of patrol deputies working OTS funded and city funded traffic operations. So those monies have kind of gone away, and so we just have the 2 full-time deputies now, and so that's why you're not seeing a huge increase in citations. It's just kind of leveling off from patrol deputies working overtime doing enforcement to just your baseline traffic deputies. So the hope is that with
the third
and then hopefully the 4th, that we'll see that increase.
Okay. And then can you speak to, and I apologize I didn't send you this question earlier, but even if it's a subjective answer, what the number of residents versus non-residents are? Do we have any stats on that versus for the traffic tickets?
Yes, I don't have the specific number, but I can tell you it's been pretty consistent. So even going back 10 years when I was a sergeant here, it's about 75% of the citations are issued to non-residents. So it's about a 75-25 split with 25% Norco residents. And then I had a breakdown of, and I could probably dig it up, of kind of where they were coming from, you know, Riverside, Eastvale, and then other, you know, county areas. But combined, it's about 75% of non-residents.
Okay, and then I'm glad to see we have more traffic deputies. I know our residents have been asking for that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Kevin?
I just want to thank you guys for what you do. We really appreciate our department, and I hope, I always hear they like to come to Norco, and I hope they feel welcome at all times, because we really appreciate them.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I've said it numerous times. We can't kick them out of here. I mean, we get these deputies here, and we just can't get them to leave. So.
Well, they keep getting promoted. That's how they leave.
They do, and you know the history tells us that a lot of our deputies have been promoted. So you know the sergeants that have here have been promoted to lieutenants, and the deputies have been promoted to investigators and corporals and sergeants. So we have a great track record for promotions out here, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is the deputies here, they're not overwhelmed with calls, and so when they do have a case, you know, a patrol deputy can take a case from beginning to end. So we have deputies that are writing search warrants and doing their own follow-up and getting bank records, and you know, a lot of the things that deputies in other cities can't really do because they don't have the time. You know, you have calls just coming in one after another. So it's, you take the initial report, you send it to the detectives, and then you move on to the next. So we have the luxury here of, you know, deputies like to own their investigations, and so they get a lot more experience. So it's slower in the sense of we don't have the calls, and so people might say, well, you're not getting the experience because you're not inundated with, you know, all these major crimes and shootings and, you know, all the heinous stuff that's going on. But you know, we have deputies here that have dozens of search warrants under their belt, you know, writing bank record search warrants or residential or vehicular search. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on. So they get a lot more experience in a sense because they have more time and they're not inundated with all these calls, if that makes sense.
Justin?
Yes, sir.
So you and your staff are incredible. You know you have the support of the community. But if it's appropriate, I'd like you to comment on your operation today, how you increased traffic citations that we were talking about.
Specifically?
Yeah.
Oh, Hidden Valley.
Hidden Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Because I know we have areas, everybody, it's either 7th Street, it's Corridon, it's 6th Street, so,
Yeah, so-
we're jumping. Right.
So generally the way it works with traffic enforcement is really designed to work the areas where you have the largest amounts of collisions, and so that's why you'll see a lot of enforcement on the main arteries. So Hidden Valley or Hamner, 6th Street, you know, California, like the big arteries into and out of the city is where we see most collisions, and so you'll see a lot of heavy enforcement there. We do get a lot of complaints from residents about some of the smaller streets and, you know, some of the cut-throughs. Unfortunately, sometimes those don't have the traffic collisions that really produce a lot of attention for enforcement. So really what we've done in about the last 6 or 8 months is the deputies have you know, the areas that they generally work where we have heavy traffic, and then we keep a spreadsheet on like local complaints. So whatever the street is where the residents call in and say we're having, you know, whether it's speeders or whether it's by a school where you have drop-off pickup issues, we're keeping a spreadsheet, and then we're having the deputies hit those areas as well to kind of spread out the enforcement and make sure that we get to cover as much of the city as possible, not just the main arteries. Specifically to your question, we've been having a lot of issues up on Hidden Valley. Some of it's on the Corona side, some of it's on our side, but it really doesn't matter because we've had several collisions. Some of the collisions occurred on the Norco side that ran into the Corona side, or the Corona side that ran into the Norco side. So it's really a problem for both of the cities. So this morning we did have a joint traffic operation with the city of Corona. So our traffic deputies and the Corona traffic officers went out, and in an hour and a half, so from 7:30 to 9, they wrote 36 speeding tickets. So there was no shortage of work there for them. So we're hoping that kind of drives down the speed a little bit, but it's been an ongoing issue. In addition to our own people, we do have a countywide street racing task force, and they've actually been working this area pretty heavily as well, primarily at night when we have some of those issues. But we've had the luxury of having some other deputies. They have a 5-man team that they work countywide, but they've been spending, I wouldn't say a significant amount of time, but they've been spending a good deal of their free time here just working that Norco Hills area. And so, you know, they've been pretty successful in writing citations. We had, you know, it's free service for us. So we're hoping to drive down some of the issues up there. And with our newest traffic deputy, that's a night position, so that's hopefully we're gonna see some changes or some effect from that as well.
Good. Appreciate it. Dana, do we have any public comment cards?
I have no public comment cards for this item.
Okay, thank you. Take this back to for any council discussion and action. The recommendation is to receive and file.
Make a motion to receive and file.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Evan, did yours spot? Okay. Okay. Then Councilmember Hoffman? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Item 5B, award of a design build services contract to Act 1 Construction for a new 21,000 square foot enclosed barn at the George Engels Equestrian Event Center. Michelle, do you want to start?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Before you this evening is a request to award a design build services contract to Act 1 Construction, Inc. for a new enclosed barn at the George Engels Equestrian Event Center. A little bit of background, the George Engels Equestrian Event Center is an 80-acre site that has been a fixture of the community since the 1970s. One of the original fixtures included 3 pole barns located just east of Nellie Weaver Hall. The original pole barns covered a 21,000 square foot area built in the early 1970s by volunteers, and it is an example of historical community values in Horsetown, USA. Over the past 5 decades, the pole barns have hosted a myriad of activities, including livestock shows and auctions, hosting 4-H and FFA members from the Norco community and beyond in conjunction with the Norco Fair, Norco Mounted Posse rodeo dances, steak fondue barbecue, community events such as a Christmas festival, wedding ceremonies, private events, and more. The upkeep and maintenance of the pole barns has been limited. After nearly 50 years of use and exposure to the elements, the 3 pole barns reached their useful life and were demolished in 2021. In 2020, the Community Services Department began researching and evaluating potential options to replace the pole barns. The focus group was established to evaluate the past, present, and future needs of the community to determine what kind of facility or facilities should be constructed. The focus group recommended replacing the 3 open facade pole barns with a single 21,000 square foot barn structure, which matches the previous footprint and encompasses all of the elements needed to host events and livestock shows. The general consensus was to create a singular enclosed structure that would have a concrete floor and enclosed walls that would provide various benefits, including, but not limited to, the elimination of weather-related impacts from wind, rain, heat, and cold that would result in the cancellation of events, allow for larger events and prospective specialized expos, which can provide economic stimulus to the local establishments and TOT revenue, increase attendance capacity at community events such as Breakfast with Santa, and add to the city's critical sheltering of animals and livestock during emergency evacuations. Staff elected to use a design-build RFP process, which allowed the city to review all submitted proposals, evaluate scope of work, and interview the top submitters. The RFP was published on October 14th, 2021, and a total of 4 proposals were submitted by the deadline. However, 2 proposals were rejected prior to interviews. Act One Construction, Inc. and facility builders and erectors were interviewed by an in-person panel to review each company's proposal, including overall project cost, modifiable project elements, alternate construction ideas, and realistic scheduling to complete the project. Based on the interviews and initial proposed project cost, staff elected to enter into good faith negotiations for best value with Act One Construction, Inc. During good faith negotiations, Act One Construction, Inc. revised their proposal based on minor revisions to the scope of work, which resulted in a reduced project cost of $3,098,059. In fiscal year 2021, the City Council allocated $1,068,750 using Measure R funds for this project, which was based upon an expectation to replace the existing facility configuration with proper accessibility and drainage. The revised scope and scale of work necessary to complete a singular monitor steel frame barn was expected to result in a significantly higher budget to complete the proposed project. The final proposed cost for the new barn of $3,098,059 does not take into account the additional staffing, furniture and equipment, and operations and maintenance costs that will need to be provided in order to make the new facility operational and successful. Here's a cost summary of the project. You can see the cost for Act One, the contingency, the F&E furniture and equipment, the already incurred costs and outstanding purchase order, which brings the additional funds needed for this project at $2,871,440,000. As this is a design-build project, I'd like to point out that the contingency would only be used in rare circumstances, such as owner-driven changes to the scope of work and unforeseen situations arising from the execution of the design-build contract. Barring any questions and comments that City Council may have, staff is respectfully requesting City Council to approve contract between the City of Norco and Act One Construction, Inc. for a design-build project to construct a steel frame monitor barn in the amount of $3,098,059 and authorize the city manager to approve contract change orders up to 10% of the original contract amount. Additionally, request the City Council adopt resolution number 2022-19 to appropriate funds in the amount of $2,871,440 to fully fund the steel frame monitor barn project and the procurement of furniture and equipment. At this time, staff will take any questions you have.
Thank you, Michelle. Start, Catherine.
Sure, just 2 questions, Michelle. Could you just speak a little bit to how we went from the original proposed $1 million cost to the cost that we're at today?
Yes, I believe that I was not involved in the original project, but it started with a concept to replace what was there, and that process kind of evolved into a bigger project, so to speak, with more amenities to address some ADA issues and some other amenities that would be wanted for this type of a facility. I think there was concrete added, there was, enclosed door, walls included. There was some drainage issues that we had to address for washing down of the animals. And I think Dom or Dave, if you have any additions to that? Okay.
And then my second question is, what is our anticipated fund balance that's not allocated in Measure R for the end of this fiscal year?
Is that? Okay.
I would have to get back to you, but I know at June 30th of 2021, we did have an estimated fund balance of.
Was it around 5 million? Does that sound about right?
That's expected
That's
at the
what
end
I'm
of this fiscal year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Kevin?
No questions.
Ted?
I've actually sit and talked to staff prior to this. A lot of my questions were answered on the particulars, but just some of the things. Michelle, what's the time on this? The construction time? How far we're going to be?
Well, if it's approved tonight, the contractor would like to get started tonight, or not tonight, but immediately. Actually, he
That's
wanted
pretty
to get
good,
started a long time ago, because as the days go by, the cost is going up.
Okay, so it's immediate. So what?
Immediate, yes.
So what's our time frame? Just.
It's expected to be about a 3-month design process and then about an 8-month construction process.
So we're looking at a year, easy. Okay, just asking. And then right now you have almost everything coming out as your Measure R, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Right now, most of the funding you have listed is from Measure R.
That is correct.
And I will, if you don't know, I can defer to Lizette or to Andy. But it doesn't mean that all the monies have to come out of Measure R, correct?
That
For
is up
funding
to
this thing.
council. That is up to council.
It's up to the council, correct? That's what I'm just saying. All right. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to reserve any more questions until after the public comments. Thank you.
Okay, Ted. Robin?
No question.
No questions at this time, Michelle. Dana? No cards?
A few.
Okay.
The first speaker card is Annie Peak, and you will be limited to 3 minutes. Annie Peak.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Annie Peak. I'm the current president of my 4-H club, the Albert Aggies. I've been a part of this club for 10 years now. I'm here to speak about the pole barns being built. My club will be able to use them during our town's fair if they are built. I would also like to speak on behalf of my club for our new members and for the ones who miss this essential part of our community. It's been 2 years without our Norco livestock barns and without our show. 2 years of promises for our barns to be built. These barns provide a safe place for our animals, a place to make new memories. In our old barn, I made new friends, I learned, and I grew. This show has afforded me the opportunity to go to college. I've learned how to grow what we eat through an ethical manner. And I sold that animal that I grew, and it became a food source for someone. I would like to continue this learning through an available area for this to happen. Let's build for our future 4-H'ers. Let's build for our community to see what we're growing, and let's build so that we don't have to go 2 years without wearing our uniforms again. Let's build for Norco I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Tegan Jefferson.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Tegan Jefferson. I'm also a part of the Albert Aggies 4-H Club, and I've also been in for about 10 years or so. I've grown a lot from showing in those 4-H, those barns, and it's really important to encourage this approval because there's a lot that benefits even more than just 4-Hers, because even when I was younger and I showed a pig, and I was bought by an actual a company. It was bought by Linda's Feed, and I think that it's really important because it brings our community together, because there are companies that go and they buy these animals from these kids, and that money goes to the kids, whether they invest it in more animals or they invest it in future projects like going to college or buying a car. And it's really important. And because there's only 1% of agricultural jobs that are in America, and these kids are encouraged and they learn and grow about agriculture, which is extremely important, you know? Thank you. And
Good job. Thank you.
My next speaker is Isaiah Bronner. Sorry if I got that wrong, Isaiah.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, my name is Isaiah Browner. I am 9 years old. I have participated in 4-H for 3 years. I am the future of farming and agriculture. I have had the opportunity to show my dairy goat at SoCal Fair, my chicken at Kmart Farms. I am looking forward to showing my dairy goat Milkshake, my chicken Mr. Fluffy Butt, my turkey Zeus, my future meat goat, and most of all my horse Moonshine this year. The barn we are asking for will further my dreams to going to nationals and representing our area. The barn will show a rural lifestyle that I love. Please consider my future and the future of showing livestock in your decision. Thank you for all the support, and hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Pat Overstreet.
I bought a lot of pigs I didn't have to walk. Good
Hi,
evening
Pat.
again, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Well, it would appear clearly that tonight we are celebrating traditions and history and volunteerism, all pretty much the heart of what stands for Norco as a community. And I think our tradition of the fair exemplifies all of that. And it's great following these young people with what they've actually been doing up in the pole barn. You know, the fair, besides the kettle corn, which I can hardly wait to get back to, and the cotton candy and the ranch rodeo and everything, the heart of the whole event, I think, is the 4-H and the FFA kids up there. After a whole year of raising these animals and selling them, some for food, many just became lawn ornaments, you know, for the rest of us who wanted to adopt them. I think the 4-H and FFA students and their parents deserve a first-class venue with as many amenities as our city budget will allow. You know, praying for the future of Norco, I hope in 100 years we're still a city living in a rural atmosphere. And with a great venue up there, replacing the old pole barns. I just totally endorse this agenda item and specifically support Act 1 construction. If anything that they create is exemplified by what they've done up at the Veterans Memorial. I don't see how you could go with anybody else, and I'm glad to see that they're up for it. So I'm here tonight to absolutely support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Our next speaker is Isabel Henriksen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council
evening.
members. A lot of you probably know me. I was president of FFA. I did a lot of FFA 4 years. Weird to say I'm alumni for a year now. I also served on Norco Youth Advisory for 2 years. It's a pleasure to be here. To see that when I heard this barn was being built, it was quite amazing to hear. Although the memories that have been made at those fairgrounds was amazing. Countless naps on the bleachers when we could take a moment. I'm proud to say that FFA and those fairgrounds have shaped me into the person I am today, and I can speak in front of you guys, no issues. I can go to a job. All the countless skills I've learned, I will forever be grateful for. It's awesome to see you guys do something for the kids. It's just amazing. I mean, still reminisce on those years. It's just been awesome to see that this is being built. So thank you so much, and this is gonna be one heck of a investment. I can tell you that for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Amanda McCauley.
Hi, Amanda. How you been?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good evening. First, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Amanda McCauley, and I am a former 4-year Norco High FFA student. At one time, I was the secretary and vice president of the Norco FFA chapter. Now, I myself had never shown or raised livestock for FFA, but was always helping out at the time of fair or assisting friends who were. I can tell you that raising an animal teaches responsibility, patience, companionship, time management, and how to care for something that truly relies on you. I strongly believe these lessons helped aid in the growth and development of my generation and will for the future ones to come. Now you may be asking, how does this include the approval of a new barn being built? A new barn not only allows FFA students to showcase their achievements and hard work that was put into raising a livestock animal, but allows the community to have a place to interact and be a part of that journey. Norco is known for its rural lifestyle, and a new barn that permits events such as showing livestock is an asset that is keeping that rural reputation alive. I personally can tell you that some of my fondest memories were made at the old barn, helping my FFA comrades during fair time. I sincerely hope that another barn is built, and that not only FFA kids, but Norco and other kids alive get to have a place to make memories like I did, and to get to be a part of that Norco rural lifestyle. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Mike Williams.
Good evening, Mike.
Mr. Mayor, council, staff, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm in support of this barn, obviously, because I think it's a real centerpiece of this city and what it offers to FFA, different nonprofits around the town. I've got big questions how this went from about $1.1 million to nearly $4 million. That's just mind-boggling to me. How did that happen? But I have to say that I'm not against it in any idea. What I would say is this: you've got a lot of considerations. I'm looking forward to the conversation to hear what council has to say. I hope that you would put as much effort into the law enforcement and into our streets here in the city as you would into this barn. law enforcement streets are something we all use every day, and we need as much effort into that as we do something like this. This is quite an investment for this city. So that's what I'll leave you with, and good luck in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Jeff Cahan.
Hi, Jeff.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council staff. I had a 10-minute speech I was going to give, but all I can say now is, are you going to say no to Isaiah? I mean, seriously, perfect speech, the future of Norco. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on council someday. But our children, our kids, this is Norco. This barn is clearly a part of our heritage. To replace it, yes, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit better, but that's the way we do things in Norco, and I'll echo what Pat said. If anybody's going to build it, absolutely Act 1 construction. I support this. Thank you.
Next speaker, Norva Williams.
Good evening, Norva.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful comments tonight. I'm totally in agreement with doing this. We need to go for it, and I really like the idea of naming it after Kathy Acevedo. I think that's a great idea as well. So I'm for this. Go for it. Especially these kids. They're wonderful.
Next speaker, Patrick Mitchell.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk on this. Like Mike, the amount of money is staggering, but that's the case with everything right now. I'd like to say that I support this project because as an agricultural educator that works with adults who didn't have the opportunity to show livestock and raise animals in this way, you can really see the difference. And so although I think the cost is high, I think the value is probably worth it, and I support this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gina Boster.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
I'd like to take this opportunity for the council and thank you for allowing us to speak on this. I'm here tonight as a community member, although I no longer live in Norco. I represent the history of Norco, such as Kevin discusses. I came to this, my family moved to Norco in 1972. And in 1972, our facilities for the fair was located at the old community center. And if you remember, and some of you I know do, that was definitely a fire trap. And we used to have our show ring underneath parachutes. Yeah, and so I think one of the big things I wanted to talk to is the legacy of my father more than anything, as he was one of those instructors who, when we moved here, that helped move this facilities up to the current location up at Ingalls Park. And that was the pole barn. And I want to thank staff for the write-up that they did. I thought it was an outstanding write-up as far as the history and the volunteer in this area. This town being community. And I think that's extremely important. Of course, the best thing you can hear are from the students because they're the ones that say the best words. But I don't want the board or the council to forget the history. And as Kevin so always talks about, there's a lot of love and labor put into the facilities that were put in. And from my father's standpoint, when I was 9 years old when we moved to Norco. So I lived all of that. I'm a Norco High School graduate. Some of you know in a previous life, I was also the agriculture instructor at Norco High School. So I spent a lot of time in that life working on those facilities, putting in misters, pouring new livestock pens. My high school agriculture instructor, Ron Payne, was very much involved in that. I think the best thing that the council can do is approve this and move forward. I also strongly believe that the multi-use of this facilities is definitely a sales point to include this facilities. If anybody would ever like to know more history about that facilities, I'm sure I can speak to it as much as Kevin and Ted can. And if you don't know it, my dad was one of Ted's high school instructors, and I was also one of Robin's instructors. So, yeah.
You know who to blame.
But I like to think that she was one of those little kids not too long ago, and now is representing your city very well. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Haley Mendoza.
Hello.
Hi. Getting this barn rebuilt will mean a lot, not just for this community, but for us in general, because raising livestock is a big deal for us because it teaches us a lot of things that you wouldn't normally would get to learn outside of ag, and it would help us grow, especially for future leaders.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Noemi Gonzalez.
Good evening.
Good evening. Like you said, my name is Noemi Gonzalez. Getting this barn rebuilt for us, I think it's something that really needs to be done because it doesn't only affect the Norco community, but it affects the communities around. I attend Norte Vista High School, and I'm my chapter's reporter, and I've been in this program for the past 4 years. I've raised animals for the past 4 years, and it has really changed my life so much, and I think it should be something that really needs to be done, and yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next is, I'm sorry if I mess up the name, is it Sagdi Baker?
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Sadie Baker. I'm from the Norte Vista FA chapter. I'm currently serving as our chapter's president. And for the last 4 years, I've been part of FFA, and I have raised animals for the last 4 years. And it has changed my life. If you would have asked me in 8th grade if I would be in this exact position right now, I would have said absolutely not. And yeah, overall FFA is a great program, and having this barn built is going to not only invest in the Norco community, but invest in us, which are our future leaders of our country. And so, yeah, the new barn is going to be not only investment for you guys, but investment for us in the future. And it's a really good thing to be happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Heather Mendoza.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Heather Mendoza. I am this year's vice president for the Norte Vista chapter, and having this facility rebuilt would mean a lot to this community. 4-H and FFA members, not just to have weddings and big events, but for the livestock shows where we'll be able to see our future leaders flourish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Braylee Steele.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Braylee Steele. I am a part of the Alvord Aggies 4-H, and I have been since I was 8 years old. And I've been showing in Norco since I was 9. I've had many happy memories and grew a lot from it. I've learned leadership skills, and
I've learned responsibility and a lot. I think we need this new facility because it would make an amazing place to show in, and it will bring the community together, not just the community, everyone that goes there. And it will help us to gain new experiences, and I hope you will approve the building of the new facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Kaylee McNall.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Kaylee McNall, and I am a member of the Alvord Aggies 4-H and Norte Vista FFA. I've been raising and showing livestock my whole life, and most of the places I show at are really old and worn down. I put a lot of hard work and time into my projects and would love to have a beautiful place like this to show at before I graduate high school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Hannah Hanks.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Hannah Hanks, and I'm with the Alvord Aggies 4-H. Putting on a green hat and a corduroy jacket means that we're a family. This family's been separated for 2 years. This building would be a great establishment for us, and it's also because we are a community with Norco. Many costs have gone up. Costs for supplies and building materials, but costs have also gone up for us. This would help us greatly. This would also be a continuing tradition for many years to come. It would be great for this building to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Madison Butler.
Hi, Madison.
Good evening. My name is Madison Butler, and this is my first year with 4-H Everett Aggies 4-H Club. I am 10 years old, and I am looking forward to this opportunity to show in this new barn with my market hogs. And I am so happy to make new memories. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carol Lindsay.
Hi, Carol.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have heard great comments from the youth of our town, and I'm here as an agriculture teacher tonight, not only to reiterate everything that the kids have shared with you, but to maybe give you some insight into some other potential uses for the facility. I understand it's a big cost, and you've also heard, and I'm sure you all know, costs of everything have gone up since, well, the dreaded C word. And so I think it's a fair assumption that the prices have gone up on this. But I can also tell you that when we've had things in the community, like September of 2021, we hosted, because we wanted something for our kids to participate in, the Horsetown Showdown jackpot show. And it was held up at the arena because that was the only facility that we had available. We had over 80 exhibitors come from all over Southern California and even Central California. And the comments that you all got on that facility were amazing. And that was us pulling in panels and setting things up. People wanted to come back. They wanted to know when the next one was before they had their trailers packed to go home. When you build this barn, I will tell you, it won't only host the Norco Livestock Show. The California Agriculture Teachers Association for our region would host meetings there for over 150 people. We would have 58 Southern Region FFA chapters coming to the Norco area to host different FFA events. We have outgrown a lot of the Southern California locations. You are building a facility that would help host those types of things. And that's just the agriculture stuff. Going to other venues in town for events, dinners, receptions, that facility that you're building would be a great asset for those things. I know one that we are a part of, the Barn Dance, would probably very easily move from Nellie Weaver Hall to that location because we are about out of space in Nellie Weaver. We cannot be the only organization in this community and the local community that would benefit from a larger venue to host things for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have no further speaker cards on this item.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, we're going to bring this back for council discussion and action. Catherine, start with you.
Thanks, Greg.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, so the great thing about what is happening tonight, first I want to thank everyone for coming out, because it's so important when we have big decisions and we have a lot of money on the line that we hear from our residents. And so to hear overwhelmingly that everyone is here in support really helps us to make a decision. And the second great thing that we have going for us is that we have a surplus of Measure R funds. There are funds to do this building, to allocate to it. Our Measure R revenues have increased every year since Measure R was started. It was projected it would only be about $4.5 million every year. Last year it was almost $6 million. This year we're projected to be at almost $8 million. So how lucky are we, right, that we have these funds? And I want to thank all the residents who shop Norco, because the money you spend at Tractor Supply and our feed stores and Target and wherever else you go locally, that's the money that's coming in to put something like this on the table and for us to spend this kind of money. The new barn also fits directly under what Measure R funds can be used for. The ballot measure specifically says that Measure R funds can be used to keep Norco, and to continue to protect Norco's unique animal keeping lifestyle. I can't think of anything more Norco than a big giant barn up at Ingalls, right? That our kids can use, and that can be used by all members of the community. It's not limited to just ag events. I also want to say that I support the naming of the barn after Kathy Acevedo. I thought that was a really wonderful and touching idea, and so I'm eager to hear what my colleagues say. And then I also just want to add that, and I heard a couple other folks talk about that the new facility, our goal is that it's going to bring folks to Norco. And they're going to be coming here, and they're going to see our beautiful new facility, and they're going to come over our beautiful new bridge. And so I don't want to just stop with the barn. I want to make sure that we're giving our residents more to be proud of, and that we get the barn built, and that we make a commitment, and we continue to keep reinvesting in our roads to make sure that people's experience when they're coming to our town is a great one, and that they're going to come and keep coming back. I hear so much, when I ran for council, folks talking about how charming our town is, and how the charm that they see and that they love, that we want that to be reflected everywhere, that everyone sees that in our town, and that that's reflected. And I think that we can continue to do that. And so making sure that our roads are in good shape as well will just add to the economic development opportunities for our town. And, we're adding a third traffic deputy. We're going to be looking at adding a fourth. So those non-residents as well, when they're coming through our town, they can put some revenue in our pockets if they get any tickets. So I'm also eager to hear what my counterparts say, but those are my thoughts on the matter at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Kevin?
So, couple of things. One, in terms of Kathy Acevedo, I can assure you that we're working very hard on her memorial. The problem is as you all know, we lost somebody that forced us to push forward our memorial. That memorial began for Gold Star mothers, and we had some fathers that got upset, and so it became the Gold Star family. But with the loss of Cream Nakui, that became the priority. It's in design. Kathy's memorial is in design. Both Ted and I are very committed to it. Yes, the location has changed because the view is better. So at no time have we forgotten Kathy Acevedo, who, as you all know, was one of my best friends. I also want to put a shout out to Mr. Boster. Mr. Boster is somebody, one of the things that, part of the reason that drives me as a historian is because people get forgotten. And that's one of the reasons why the spirit of Norco Kathy Azevedo Award will include names of people so we never forget them. This is a town that we literally built probably one of the nicest memorials in the state of California, specifically to list the 36 names that are on it today. So I don't want anybody to forget that. I got news for you. I got a list of 100 people I could name that barn after, all of whom would be worthy. Law enforcement. You know, one of the great things about law enforcement is when you have it, it's great. But there's another component to it that I think sometimes people get wrong when they say, well, we have to make sure that we do the community stuff too. There's two parts of law enforcement. One is the job of our lieutenant, of our deputies, but the other job is this council. I sat for 10 years as a Park and Rec commissioner, and I'd always hear about teen centers and different things. They don't work. The kids don't go to them. You have to become interest-centric. I have no problem, and we've done it. We put millions of dollars into our ball fields, millions of dollars into our scout house. We try to find those things that will keep a child's interest, because the goal is, it's better. We want to keep them out of the back of a patrol car by keeping on a playing field, or playing. I posted something about computer games, the gaming arena at Norco High School. That is like the best one literally in the state of California, but it's an extension of a technology training that is incredible at Norco High School. I'd rather have the kids sitting in those seats learning a technology that eventually they're going to run the world than sitting in the back of a patrol car. That's our job. Streets. You know what? When I got on council, all those trees, and Greg will attest to this, and everybody, 6th Street, all the trees were dying. 6th Street didn't look like it looks today. We had no money, but we put money into streets, and right now we're repairing more streets than any time in the history of the city. And in the old days, when you were council, you go, oh, I got to fix the street, so we put a layer of asphalt and everything. Not me, previous councils. Now, we don't do that anymore. If you recall 6th Street, when they paved it, looked really nice in 2007, looked beautiful, gorgeous, but then all the pipes underneath kept breaking, and they had to keep fixing them, tearing it up. We now fix them from underneath to the top. So it takes a little bit of time. In terms of cost, and I don't know, Don can attest to this, I just got a bid on some concrete, and I was told it went from $40 a yard to $160 a yard. Now, I'm sure he gets it cheaper, but that's about the margin of this increase. That's just the reality. One of the things that I'm getting, and I wanted to ask Robin real quick. Robin, how many of these facilities do we have regionally?
As far as like livestock shows, some of the young people here have told you this evening we have the SoCal. They just recently finished up with the Riverside County Fair in Indio, but on both of those locations, the ag teachers and these students go out. Usually the week before, they put up the panels, they put up everything. So they're going out to a dirt area and setting this stuff up, or they're going out to an asphalt area and setting this stuff up. And so when we talk about a facility, even the old pole barns, there wasn't really anything like that. And so again, it's no different though. We would go and set up the panels and the show ring and a lot of those types of equipment. But you're seeing, just like when you guys talk about the equine stuff, the facilities for being able to show animals and do these types of activities are slowly going away, or they're not being funded. And so when we talk about bringing people to Norco, if this is here, it's going to be one of the few, and it will certainly be a gem compared to everything else, I would say, south of Bakersfield easily.
So the angle I'm coming at here, as you probably all know, we just put a historic overlay over the entire city of Norco, where the rules for historic preservation are based in something called Bulletin 15. Bulletin 15 is the federal statute, but a lot of those trickle down into the California State Historic Statute. We did that to protect ourselves. In that booklet, one of the rules is if you're the only one, you're done. Meaning, you're done. So by fostering things like this pole barn and by fostering that kind of usage and being, what Robin just said, the only one, we're helping to strengthen the entire in a very practical way. Because when you have a historic district, you are exempt from some of the more onerous housing laws. So in essence, we're not only a hub, but it may help us to protect the lifestyle. It's yet another argument we can use. And then when I was a Park and Rec commissioner, one of the things we used to say is, okay, yeah, those lights are going to be $500,000 or whatever they were. Now they'd be a lot more. What's the price of one child? And I know that sounds really, people are going to say, oh my God, it's all this money. But the truth of the matter is, what is the price of our children? Are they worth $2 million? I think so, and one of the things Catherine alluded to is we are blessed. When I got on council in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, we couldn't even begin to do this. We can now, and we can afford it. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, nobody's even going to know what this cost. And I will close with, I'm not surprised that Dawn, a Norco High School graduate, wants to go to work tonight. Hammering. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Ted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gina, you reminded me of all the things that historical about that site. And yeah, her dad, Art Boster, was my college instructor. And I tell you what, I'll throw you some names out. Kevin, Art Boster, John Cobb, all these guys. Larry Bentley from the old Altadena, he had his hand in this thing. They believed in this town. And when you think about how the original pole barns were built, I mean, I've been out here since '57. I know what she talked about, where Riley Jim was back there. This livestock shows were back in there. I know because I showed dairy cows back there, and it was always hot.
I showed there too.
Oh, that's scary. But those are the things we did back then, and the volunteers is what built it. You think about, I mean, those guys, I can remember a guy named Paul Singer donating telephone poles. Some of those poles were donated. You can't do that anymore today. You can't build like that. So what they did back then was truly amazing back in the 70s. Today, everything has to be engineered. You have to have all this so that because of the liabilities, because of the fact that it'll fall if you don't. When we look back at what, people haven't taken care of it, trust me, her crews and the crews before her have taken care of that. But you could only take care of something for so long, especially when most of that stuff was donated to begin with. It wasn't pristine. It wasn't brand new. And then when we get our 70-mile-an-hour winds up there, it takes a toll on it. It gets weathered. I see Randy back here, and Randy, if you remember, we changed that into a chameleon facility. I was one of the original chairmen of the rodeo, the PRCA rodeo. 3 years, we outgrew Nellie Weaver to put dances in. I sat up there with then the captain of the posse and said, Chuck, let's put it up here. We'll put a wooden dance floor in. And that's what we did. We moved our dance floors up from the August rodeo into there. Because we said that we can do it. Because there was nothing else going on up there. So we did. We made a chameleon facility out of it. Then we had to get our stuff out of it so they could have the fair the following week. And Robin probably still remembers that. We got it done, though. And that's what we're building here. If we build this and approve this. This is a chameleon facility. This will be more than just the 4-H barn. But I appreciate what you said, Carol, because it is. We can attract more. I know it's been said, well, we're only going to use it 2 or 3 times a year. No. You only use it 2 or 3 times a year now for major events. Is because we only have that, and it's outside in the heat, in the wind. We've been having so much wind right now, it just makes life miserable. I'm looking at Patty sitting in the audience, and she could probably tell you that I can book as many dog shows in there in small units. She's got her quilters that come in every year. They would love to be up there, place to go. And that's the good thing about this thing, is that if the way we build it, and it's an investment. And I counted, we had 20 speakers. 15 of them were youth. Hey, that's what we're here for. It's always been that way. 4-H FFA, the equestrian clubs. Earlier, I talked when I had Shelley and Jerry in here. They keep training these kids how to ride the barrel horses up there, how to team rope. That's what they do. That's what's the important thing about this, is the youth. We keep going. I have a concern on the cost, but I sit on 2 major county boards. The Riverside County Transportation, actually 3. Riverside County Transportation Commission, the Riverside Transit Agency, along with our flood control. It is gone crazy. Don's sitting there, he knows. One time you could figure probably the 3 to 5% increase a year in your cost. I can tell you right now, most of the engineers' studies that came back on all the projects that we have approved are way under. And the reason they're way under, because you can't, these projects have gone 25 to 30% over the bids we're getting in as compared to what the engineers have. It's just not here. Our inflation rate is sitting at 7.8, and it's probably going to be as much as 10 on some of these items. It's just crazy. So if we were to walk out here tonight and not approve this, that bid is probably already gone. You're going to add another $100,000 to it easy, because that's what's craziness about what's going on right now. And it's no fault of the builders. It's just, that's what it is. But I am concerned, and is that we have Measure R. Yes, we have a lot of money in there. But I want to make sure that what we told the residents, that we're going to use it for the replacement of the buildings. And that's the one thing. There's items on there that I think we could probably come out of a general fund or a special asset fund. Things that we don't need right now to put on this. And it's not that much. I'm looking at almost the page, the $400,000 worth of items, so we get it up and running right away. And that's why I asked you how long it was. It was 12 months to build it. Maybe we look at that, pull that out of this. It won't be that much, but maybe take it out of something. So we're truly replacing the building with a Measure R funds. And then the added items come out of our funds, or we look for them. And that would be my suggestion, and I'll wait for the mayor or Robin to add on to that. So, but I'm in support of this, always have been. Thank you.
I just hate being in the position of following you, so go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to address a few concerns that have been raised as we've gone through this process. The first one clearly is the sticker shock over the increased cost. And I think it's certainly reasonable that many residents and folks have brought that up in discussions. I think we need to look at where we started. That's been discussed quite a bit tonight, with dirt floors, some donated telephone poles, some donated trusses, and we think they probably bought the metal that was on the roof. We are all familiar with the rules and regulations of California, and so when we look to move forward, you're automatically going to have, and in my opinion, one of the biggest expenses is water retention and cleaning. You have to capture every single drop of water that comes off of that building. It has to be cleaned before it can be on its way to the ocean or wherever it goes. So you're looking at all of the manners to collect that water, then it's got to go into a clarifier, or the one that they're building up there is extensive. It's this huge underground item that cleans all the water before it can be released. We have to do a water quality management plan. You're looking at ADA slopes going in and out, handicap access, path of travel. All of those items are going to add dollars. That would have happened even without the inflation and everything else we're going through. So that would have added a huge amount of money. You put on top of that the inflation, the price increase, and all of those things, it very quickly goes from, you know, the potential 1.3 to the almost 4 million very, very quickly. So the other concern that has been voiced by a few people is, you know, where are you taking the money from? What project are you giving up so that there can be a barn? There isn't money being taken from some existing project or something that's currently being done. Like Catherine has stated, we've had Measure R perform beyond, I think, any of our expectations, honestly. And I just want to point out, and I have it because I did some research to answer an email the other day, we've done over $500,000 in improvements to our parks, over $1.1 million in improvements to our trail and trail fencing, over $2.3 million in investments and improvements to city facilities, and more than $5.9 million in roads. And that's not like a whole bunch of research. That's looking at a few reports on the capital projects page and a report that went to Parks and Rec. So I know the easy go-to kind of argument against anything in Norco is you need to fix the roads. Even my high school kids, we talk about government stuff. Well, you guys need to fix the roads. And I just feel like if we really look at those numbers, that we are doing that, and it's time to look at what other areas of this community have been neglected for years. That facility really outlasted what it should have. And it was because of the care that those groups put into that facility, repairing things, upkeeping things, that made it last as long as it did. And I can only imagine that that same level of care and pride in that facility would carry this, you know, potentially this new barn even further than the 50 years we got out of some telephone poles and old dairy trusses. And so I think it's important that we look at that investment as well. When we talk about the city of Norco, we always say rural living in a city atmosphere. So it's time to put our money where our mouth is. We always are horse focused, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, as an ag teacher, my job is to help our students learn how to make money, how to grow food, how to support themselves through agriculture. And while horses are wonderful, and a lot of us have them, I like to call mine the little hay burner, I need to have other animals that are going to support feeding my family and feeding other people's families. And that's what a lot of these young people that are here tonight. And seeing all these kids here tonight, I hope you can see that we're not just teaching them how to show a pig in a ring, or we're not just telling them, you know, go out there and shed a few tears during the auction and get some extra money. They're learning how to be a good public speaker. They're learning how to be compassionate and take care of an animal, and you can tell they know how to take care of each other. They build friendships. They build relationships. We have people, young people in this audience that have been out of the programs, that have come back to speak because that's how important it is to them. And so I can't think of anything that speaks to the importance of this any more than the fact that young people, who a lot of people say are apathetic, showed up to a council meeting in numbers higher than most adults would on an issue that they feel passionate about, to tell us how important this is. They are being civically engaged. They're taking responsibility for something that they feel is important. So it's not just about raising a pig or showing at, you know, the Norco Fair. It's a lot more than that. And I hope our community and those watching this evening can see that. And then the last thing I'll speak to, it's not going to be used just once a year for some kids to go show some animals. There will be weddings in that venue. There will be weddings, receptions, conferences, trade shows, dog shows, rabbit shows. The list goes on and on. If we build it, they will come. There is not a facility the size of what we are doing right now in this region. Try and book a wedding anytime between now and 2024 and see where you end up. Try and book a dinner event with more than 10 tables and see where you can find and what the price is for that. It's going to be an economic driver, and in my opinion, at the end of the day, we are dedicating ourselves and putting our money where our mouth is. If this is city living in a rural atmosphere, then we need to be raising our youth in that manner, training them in that manner so that this perpetuates and it's here long before or longer than any of the rest of us are. Because my time up here, personally, just my opinion, is Norco needs to be better than when I started, and it needs to go on beyond my lifetime to prove that what we were doing really mattered. What approving this barn for me this evening, it really matters. So that's all I have.
Easy. So, a couple of comments. For the last 2 years, we've been working on this, the council subcommittee of myself and Robin, subcommittee with Parks and Rec, Jason Borsman. Corinne started with it until she moved. Parks and Rec staff. And I think we put our heart and soul for the last 2 years into developing this project. There have been comments and concerns about the cost from where we started, and that I think we've been extremely prudent with the way we approach this project, going with a design build bid situation. I think we had close to 12 contractors at our job walk. At the received bids, I think we were then down to 4, and then we interviewed all the contractors. We narrowed it down. We rated each contractor separately and independently. We then narrowed it down to 2 contractors. We interviewed both of them. We interviewed them a second time with value engineering. And like I said, I think we've done our due diligence. There's not a lot of fluff in this building. It's functional. It's something that's going to easily grow with the community for at least the next 20 years with a life expectancy of 50 years. It's absolutely the right thing to do. And it's, I don't know how to address the cost increases other than the environment that we're in. I mean, as the contractor and his team, can comment. I think we looked at every aspect on how to reduce costs. Can't squeeze that lemon anymore. I think we got it right where it needs, and it needs to be cost-wise and how it's going to function for us. One thing I did want to talk to council about was in this resolution, we have approximately $400,000 in furniture and equipment, and I'd like to take that out of this discussion. I felt this agenda item should be just the contract alone. That we take that out of the resolution, the $400,000 for furniture, equipment, but put it as a date certain that in our next year's budget, that Parks and Rec staff is going to be part of your budget. Okay? So I'd like to have your opinion on all of that. Michelle had mentioned earlier about the $300 and some thousand authorization for the city manager on potential change orders. And I'd just like to reiterate, in the approach that we use with the design build, change orders should be at a minimum. It's either going to be unforeseen circumstances that none of us anticipated, or owner-driven, city-driven change orders. So I don't see us encroaching into that amount, that severely. So I'd like your opinion on what you think about moving furniture and equipment out of this resolution, but certainly it has to be addressed in next year's budget for Parks and Rec.
I'm all in. I just think, just do it. I totally get the 400,000, but we never know what'll happen next year. I mean, we're in a very good position financially, but I just think if they have to order it, I mean, Ted and I have gone through waiting for things, and why not just get it done? And that's just kind of how I feel about it. But I understand your point, but for me, just get it done.
Catherine?
I'm fine with it if we want to move it to a date certain. I'm fine with ordering it now. If we wanted to take it out of the general fund reserve instead of Measure R, I'm fine with that. I don't really want to, I would prefer not to take it out of the special asset fund, but rather the general fund. There are funds for that. And I understand the concern that Kevin has also with the lag time that there is in many industries. So it might behoove us to order sooner rather than later.
Robin?
I'm in favor of moving furniture and equipment to another fund, because I understand the sensitivity around Measure R. And so my main concern would be that it be addressed either to a date certain, or we designate where that money would come from tonight, so that it just doesn't get dropped off. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Ted?
I agree with Robin on this one. I think we can if we can remove the 400,000, I think we still stay in the good spirit of Measure R with replacing buildings, as we talked about in the ad hoc committees that were on infrastructure back in 2014 and 15. And then I would probably agree to take it out of the general fund, and we just did an amendment to our budget for the year. This thing isn't going to have for 12 months, and so knowing that we can approve this come the end of June, first part of July, it goes through, boom, they still got 6 months to procure this stuff. So I mean, that's why I look, or put it on order with a date of July 1st, boom, you pay for it. So I that's just because my spirit of the Measure R committee. Thank you.
Michelle, do you have any concerns with that as far as for senior management and staff if we were to move it to your general budget out of general fund?
I think that would be acceptable.
Okay. And Kevin, to your point, none of those items listed are really long lead items. It's tables, chairs, furnishings, which will have to be addressed with other areas. But
I guess just looking at the way the inflation is going, stuff like that, we might find out that a chair is 5 times what we thought it was going to be. In fact, I would predict that is going to happen, or the cost is going to drop so much, and then we're all in a world of hurt. So I'm just concerned that it's going to get more expensive. But I don't have a problem taking it out of another fund. But I will make this point, and I didn't make it very well. There's 2 levels to law enforcement. One is the people that are enforcing the laws. The other one is our responsibility to try to create venues for kids to stay out of those patrol cars. So for me, Measure R, we're right in keeping with that. There's no difference between building this pole barn for a group of people, and yes, I get all the other uses that'll happen, but that's why we put all this money into fields. That's why we put all this money into the Scout House. That's why we put all this money trying to find those things that these teenagers will get involved in that are healthy. I mean, Robin right now is getting ready to, through Unload, we're getting ready to put on something about fentanyl. It's at an epidemic proportion. And then, you know, forget my soapbox, but you got cities that now are selling marijuana to make money. Where do they really think that's going to go? So for me, this building is totally, it's our half of law enforcement. So I just think rather than, if you want to take it out of the general fund, I'm fine with that, but I just think get it done. Let's do it. We've been, you know, you guys have worked hard. I'm sure you looked at the cost of the furniture, and let's just do it.
So this is kind of a 4-to-1 consensus on moving it to budget discussions. Once again, I'd like to thank all the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, you did very well. Impressive. I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Oh, go ahead.
Well, because I'm just going to take off the 400,
Go ahead.
right?
Yep.
All right. I move to adopt resolution number 2022-19 to appropriate funds in the amount of, and this is where the change will be, Dana, $2,471,440 to fully fund the steel frame monitor barn project, period.
So we're taking out the furniture and equipment. However that dollar amount adjusts. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, see, under discussion, oh, okay.
I'll second.
All right, so under discussion,
Though.
under your second, part of the concern I had was on that furniture and equipment. The bid, okay, includes a stainless steel top, a stainless steel sink. One of the items listed on this equipment list was sink, faucets. It's kind of an older list in a way that was just developed over the last 2 years. So some of those items are not specific.
So the kitchen stuff, all the furniture that's going to go inside, we're going to put off to a date certain.
Next year. Budget.
My second stands.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second.
Yes. And motion carries.
Good. Don, you'll be out there tomorrow morning? Or tonight?
Night.
Good job. Let's go ahead and take a 5-10 minute break. Thank you all so much. Public hearing, Zone Code Amendment 2021-04. Dana?
Order of presentation for public hearing items. Staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. 3, open public hearing with public comment. Closed public hearing, council discussion and action. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Dana. Alma?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I do have a PowerPoint presentation, so I guess hopefully it'll come up in a minute. So, as the council does recall, this item was continued from the City Council meeting on the last meeting, which was the last meeting. It's continued from the meeting of March 2nd. The council had a lot of discussion, and after a lot of discussion, the council directed staff to make some additional changes and come back with the item. The public hearing, my understanding was, did not close, but stayed open. So, and it was continued to this meeting. So just briefly, I will go over some of the changes, very briefly, and let's see here. One of the areas that was expressed with concern was, let's see here, section 2.11 that talked about the animal keeping amenities. What was listed in the objective development standards for this item was the minimal stall size of 12 by 12, and that was it. The concern was that a 12 by 12 stall wouldn't be adequate for animal keeping in terms of usable open space for an animal. So what was section 2.211 was changed to, in addition to a 12 by 12 stall, that 576 square feet of open animal keeping area be required as well. And this pertains to the amenities that could be provided by a developer, in following the objective development standards as part of this item. The other item that was discussed by the Planning Commission, City Council, was the section pertaining to landscaping, which was section 3.1.2. The council expressed concern over the fact that there wasn't a designation of, or being more specific in terms of the size of the trees, in terms of the size of the shrubs. What was added to the section is to require along the perimeter of a project 36-inch box trees within the perimeter areas, and staff was directed to that shrubs be indicated, the size, and they have been indicated at a minimum of 5 gallon. 5 gallon is typical, usually because that is the size that's the most adequate to allow the shrubs to flourish. Sometimes when you plant them at a 15 gallon, it doesn't take root as easily as a 5 gallon. However, gallon size can be modified at the discretion of the City Council. Other thing that was added to that particular section also was that, furthermore, the requirement was added that all landscaping on the site shall consist of species identified by the County of Riverside Guide to California, friendly landscaping, and the website was provided. And lastly, in addition to the requirements of the landscaping, we made note that neither palm trees or oleanders are allowed within the entire project. Section 4.1, one of the concerns that the council had also was they didn't just want to see design elements on one side of the building. They wanted to see it wrap around the entire building. So what was added to section 4.1, let me bring that up real quick. Section 4.1 was bullet D, to require 4-sided architecture. And like I said, the City Council was concerned of architecture elements, articulation being just on one side of the building. The next item that was talked about was the lack of, design in terms of shutters on windows. Section 5.25, doors and windows, was amended by eliminating shutters and planter boxes as desired elements in favor of 2 new required bullets. Which is bullet L, saying shutters are required for at least 20% of total windows across project, and bullet point M, requiring windows shall be recessed at least 2 inches from wood facades, 4 inches from stucco faces, facades, and 12 inches from stone or brick facades. And what that adds is it creates some kind of depth in the elevation. That way it doesn't look straight and plain. The other item that was talked about was materials. What the council wanted to make sure that materials that simulated wood would be something that would be allowed. So section 5.2.6, materials, was amended by deleting the bullet pointing regarding the prohibition of vinyl, manganate, and aluminum siding, and adding bullet D, which was edited to read materials that simulate the appearance of wood, such as cement fiber, vinyl, manganate, and aluminum siding are acceptable. So lastly, section 6.2, the definition, replaced the illustrative picture for the board and battens definition. So that's included in sections 6.2. So all of these changes were items that were staff was directed to change. Those items have been added to the revised objective development standards that is in your packet. A few other things that did come up at the meeting, or a couple of other things, were regarding section 2.11 on the amenities. The concern was that if could somebody claim a density bonus if they provided animal keeping amenities? The answer is no. In conversation with our city attorney, the project that would be eligible for a density bonus actually has to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. So, in other words, by providing equestrian facilities in a project that qualifies for ministerial approval would not be allowed for the density bonus. Am I correct? Yeah. So the other item that came up that I didn't get any direction, but I figure I'd bring it up because I didn't really get, but in case the City Council wants to address is let's see here, let me bring it back up, is the section that talks about setbacks. There we go. Setbacks. The street yard setback was noted and stayed that same. Nothing has changed, but there was some discussion. It was unclear if the City Council wanted to modify setbacks for buildings. The following setback changes were brought up at the meeting. Setbacks from public right-of-way to change from 25 to 20 feet. An interior lot line setback was specified at possibly 20 feet when adjacent to the R1 or A1 zones. I didn't receive any direction on that. There was no changes. Did the City Council want to change any of the setbacks? Well, this is your opportunity to do so. Otherwise, it'll stay as what's presented at the previous meeting and is noted in the section. And lastly, just to clarify, ministerial approval when a project includes commercial. If it includes commercial and is part of one project, staff is recommending that section 1.2.2 mixed-use development, just basically to clarify the means that the commercial aspect of a project could also qualify for ministerial approval if it's part of a project that it qualifies for ministerial approval, meaning that it includes affordable housing in the percentages specified in either our housing element or an SB 35 project. With that, I'm going to conclude. Again, what is before you is the resolution to establish our objective development standards and the ordinance that would empower the objective development standards within our Norco Municipal Code, zoning code section of the Norco Municipal Code, specifically the R3 zoning and the housing development overlay. With that, I will conclude and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Kevin? Any questions of staff?
Yeah, I do have a question. So at the end of the meeting, we talked about Alma with our consultant and with you a little bit. We've never really discussed size of apartments. In other words, the size of your apartment will dictate actually what your setbacks can be and how much land it will take. And so do we I mean, you could conceivably put 20, 30 studio apartments and have a setback of 50 feet. And we've never really discussed the philosophy of studio versus two bedroom, 3 bedroom, that kind of thing. And so units my question was, can we determine if we do, because there are some cities apparently that do have a philosophy of they're trying to bring families in, but some of them are actually seeking to not use up as much of not have the impacts that the development will have on their neighbors. So if you have a complex of 20 studio apartments, it will be a smaller square footage than if you have 23 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartments. And I think that's probably a discussion we might want to have philosophically, because this is the point where we would make that decision. So did you look into that at all? And John, you can weigh in any time. Does it make sense? I mean, because there are some cities that they build entire apartments of nothing but studio apartments.
Yeah.
And then they limit the number of apartments you can have in that development, which makes it lower, makes it set back more, that kind of thing.
Could you theoretically, yes. The question under the current state law is whether or not adopting those types of standards as ministerial effectively significantly negatively impacts your ability to provide low and moderate income housing.
Studio apartments are cheaper.
Studio apartments are cheaper, but if for the cities you're talking about, I think it generally flows the other way, that they want to have 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, and if you mandated that 90% of all the units in any apartment complex have to be 2 or 3 bedrooms, that might have a negative enough impact on the ability to build low and mod that it would violate the current law. I mean, there's no real answer to that question, but I think that the direction that you're talking about of other cities has really been to discourage having a whole bunch of studio apartments, which get filled with a lot of people because there's no occupancy standards, as opposed to building larger units which are family oriented.
Well, but then that brings in the next question, is that this is not exactly a city where people are fighting to, they'd like to buy a house, but they can't afford it. But there's some cities where people are trying to find apartments. They're trying to find those kinds of things because they're trying to be close to their work centers. That's one of the cruxes of this entire situation, is that they behave as if one size fits all, and there's this mentality that it just makes me crazy. But I mean, it's actually very foolish.
Yeah. And to some extent, notwithstanding what other city regulations might be, it's just somewhat market driven. That the situations you're talking about, if the market was, you need a bunch of studio apartments because people are working down the street, and that's a different market than if you didn't have those kinds of jobs and people just wanted to move to Norco.
Right. Well, anyway, I just thought I would bring it up because it's a discussion that happens in other cities, and if it's not something, I mean, do we want to look at having a percentage of 2-bedroom apartments, 3-bedroom apartments, or can we, or they just come in and they take up every square foot with 3-bedroom apartments?
The other thing that, I mean, we obviously need to adopt this for the reasons we've talked about, but this isn't in concrete. It's something, I mean, if you want to have that discussion and make changes subsequently, you can certainly do that. I mean, this isn't the way it's got to be forever, and I expect that in real life, when you apply some of these things, you're gonna say, whoops, that isn't what we meant. So,
except that the problem is, John, is you have a building sitting there. That's the problem. There really is no wiggle room. A great example is Los Angeles. They've destroyed the city. And so you're learning as you go, but it has a residual. Anyway, that's really all I have. I just wanted to bring that up. It's something that I talked about, and I wish the setbacks were a little more, but other than that, I'm fine with this.
Ted? Questions?
I really don't have any questions.
Okay, good.
I'm good. No, you know what? No, I really don't, and I don't. But I was going to answer kind of what John alluded to was it's a market. It's going to drive what's being built by these people, and so that's enough.
We can go over that during discussion. Robin?
No question.
Catherine?
I had brought up the setbacks before, just mainly in looking at where the property line would butt up to or be adjacent to an R1 or an A1 zone. On page 5, the second paragraph under building height, buildings or structures located within 35 feet of an R1 or A1 zone shall have a maximum height of 30 feet as measured to the ridgeline and or parapet. About how many stories could fit then within 35 feet of an R1 or A1 at a 30 feet limit to the ridgeline or parapet? 3. So my comments about the setbacks on 2.4 from our first discussion were, is there any wiggling that we can do, knowing that right now where our HDO zones, there's really only one line, that one property line adjacent to R1, A1, that would allow for, not quite so high of buildings, right next to, because if a 30-foot building, that means, according to these other ones, it'd be 15 feet away from the property line of the R1 and A1 houses.
Correct. Yes, it would be, yes, that is correct. It's half the size of whatever the height of the building is. So yes, 15 feet would be required. If it's 30 feet, yeah.
So that would be my question for my fellow council members, just, is any wiggle room acceptable? And that's where I had suggested, if some came off a little bit of a parking lot, or is there some way to take off a little bit from somewhere, knowing that this isn't going to be all 4 lots and on every lot? It's really just, maybe one small area that could accommodate a little bit of a further setback for those residents if there is a 3-story building. Because I know that the consultant said, well, they could do a one story and closer, but we've limited their lot coverage, so I don't think it's practical that anyone's going to put a 1 story, because they're not going to be able to get the units they need. So they're going to be 2 and 3 story buildings. So how can we just, in any way we can, to kind of help those residents out?
Come back to that. I'm going to go ahead. If that's it for questions, do I reopen the public hearing? Or
Still open.
Or we're still open? Okay. Yeah. Public hearing is opening. Do we have any cards?
We have no public comment cards for this item.
Thank you. Close the public hearing. Back to council discussion and action. So what Catherine was just talking about was setbacks. That would there or could there be a way that, say, like with a 2-story building or a 3-story building, that there has to be like a parking lot buffer against the setback before the building? Could we create a different type of buffer?
Against R1, A1, right? Just for
Right.
that instance, yeah, and everything else will stay the same.
So
That's a good idea.
You'd have your landscape buffer, but then, say, verbiage would be like, then parking needs to be next, and then the physical buildings.
I see what you're saying.
However you wanted to word it. I'm just
I
trying
see
to
what you're saying.
get more space, because I hate these type of setbacks.
Yeah.
And as we learned over the weekend, exceptions, and people are good at finding exceptions. So,
So
I
if
don't
I
know how you
stand,
craft
yeah,
that
no,
and
I
word
think I understand what you're saying, and maybe I think Joshua might be able to help you with this also. But I believe what you're saying is that when it's adjacent to a residential zone, you want to have what may end up being a parking, either the garages or possibly the garage cover. That would have to come first. Then you can, of course, your drive aisle.
Landscaping would come first.
Yes,
then-
landscaping. Then
Then
your
whatever buffer you could create, whether it was
Like a parking,
Parking,
parking
or
shade cover,
carports.
yes, the carport.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have your drive aisle to be able to pull out.
Right.
And then, I'm assuming some kind of landscaping, then you can start the building.
And that's not really a setback. I mean, literally, that's not a setback. I mean, in which case you can address it the way that you have. Right, exactly.
The development standard.
Yeah, right. I mean, the setback, obviously, you have to calculate it from where the construction is. I mean, setback would be from a parking lot, for example. You don't get to count the parking lot as the setback.
You got a suggestion?
No, I'm
Okay.
so if I'm picturing this,
Pardon?
A1, R1.
Sorry.
I would say you'd have your 10-foot wall, because that's in the code there against that section. You'd have a 5-foot landscape buffer minimum, plus or minus. You'd have your parking space, which is 24 feet deep, 20 feet deep. You'd have some type of covered parking or garage. You'd have a 25-foot drive aisle, and then you could potentially start your buildings or have another set of parking, which would be another 20 feet, and then sidewalk, landscaping, and then your front door. So you could possibly put 5, 20, 25, like 50, 60, 70 feet away from the physical wall. If that's how you want to, especially if we're looking at properties that are against those residential zones, you shove your parking there. It's a good location there. You shove your buildings closer to the street. That way the buffer's there for those residents. That's what I would recommend. That makes sense, hopefully.
Okay. And could you then also restrict it at that height too, by saying that may limit the development, but no taller than 3 stories or no taller than 2 stories at that limit line?
That may be a little more difficult, given that, again, you don't want to create standards that would preclude them from building 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre. I think maybe possibly adding that scenario to where, okay, when it's adjacent to a residential, what I guess what would have to be adjacent to the residential would be, of course, your 5-foot landscaping buffer, then your parking, and then your drive aisle. That automatically puts you at 50 feet away from the.
Right.
Just to jump in too, I think our consultant kept reiterating, we have to have hard facts, hard black and white. 30 feet is the black and white, 2 stories is subjective, 3 stories is subjective. So I think by going with the 30-foot height max or the 20-foot height max or whatever we decide, it's black and white. So when it comes to stories, it's kind of, can you squeeze it in 25 feet? I don't know, I'm not a good designer,
really.
but maybe 30. It's whatever the sweet spot is, so that if we know we limit it to a 30-foot height max, we know we limit it to 2 stories. So that's kind of the comfort we have to know the height will equal X amount of stories. Hopefully, that's the idea.
And I agree with Catherine. Realistically, it's only one property line, I believe, that from the sites that were included in our housing element that are adjacent to.
I think that solution would work well and provide a good buffer. So if the council's amenable to that.
I don't know how to craft that in words for the resolution.
It would be something that would go into the actual design guideline pamphlet.
Okay.
So we would add a section. We could probably just add it to the setback area for anything adjacent to a residential zone. After the 5-foot landscaping buffer, as noted at the very last, here, I'll show you. Page 6. Parking lots shall be set back from interior lot lines by a minimum of 5 feet 5-foot landscaping buffer. Furthermore, when adjacent to a residential zone, after the 5-foot landscaping buffer, the parking will be required. Something of that nature will be required. Is required to provide an adequate buffer adjacent to residential.
I think what Josh just said, I think he just laid the whole thing out pretty well.
To be honest, I get what the council's going with. It's probably a multitude of different sections, but we get the point of landscape buffer, 10-foot block wall, landscape buffer of 5 feet plus or minus, a parking space of at least 20 feet, which is where you're going to find a garage or a covered parking, a drive aisle of 24 feet, and then sidewalk or another parking space, and then landscaping, and then your building.
Correct.
It's going to have to be in several sections, but we'll lay it out for you guys to make sure that.
Okay. And then Kevin, you had, last meeting, you had concerns on the windows. Are you happy with how this was changed?
Yeah, I guess I am.
Windows and articulation?
Yeah, I guess I am. I just want to make sure that they don't. I still kind of saw some that, well, you could kind of. You'd look at the picture, even though the words say something different than what the picture says. You worry that somebody will look at it and look at a judge someday and go, well, look at the picture. And the judge will say, yeah, look at the picture. So, but I'm pretty happy with it. I think it fulfilled the intent.
Have one more on
Sure.
materials. This, on 6, materials that simulate, the appearance of wood such as cement, fiber, vinyl, masonite, aluminum siding. Refresh my memory, why are we putting that in there?
Let's see.
That, I don't like any of those materials. Cement, fiber, fine. Everything else, I don't think is.
Well, I believe the intent was as long as it simulated wood, then it was fine. But again, it's up to the city council if you want to.
And it was a cost issue, right? Because the cost and the durability issue, they were saying you're not going to be able to find anything. I mean, the cost to do wood would be so expensive that these would be a good substitute. They'd be durable, they'd be cost effective. It would give the look that we were trying to achieve.
It's,
More of a purist that I just vinyl siding doesn't cut it for me, okay?
your call.
If you guys want that in there, it's
For clarity, I think the intent was to make sure that it physically looks like wood, because
Mhm.
wood doesn't handle, doesn't stand up, doesn't do well under weathering conditions. So
none of those products
would
outside of cement fiber
look good as
can
wood.
even
Fake it.
simulate wood.
Okay. Is there any
Okay.
other suggestions we can add to offset it? Any ideas?
Yeah, wood, metal,
Actual
cement
wood.
fiber.
Physical wood.
Right.
Cement. I think let's go with that. Why not?
Cement fiber.
Because I think you're right. I think a lot of the simulated wood. Now there used to be something called Trex. Is that still around? That was. Oh,
I haven't.
no, that's a It's a. Maybe that's the.
Like cement fiber.
Yeah.
That's hardy board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would support that. Those 3 items. Why not?
I just have vinyl salesman, aluminum siding salesman. You know, it's just
Because you
doesn't
know.
fit a development standard.
Because you know what? He makes a point. Because it's aluminum siding, and they could market that as this is our wood product. But if you have those 3 things, you can't get around them. Because a good salesman, it may not look like wood, but if he says it looks like wood, what are you going to do? If it has some grain in it, but I think if you use those 3 items, I think it very specifically states what you have to use. So I like that. I know we're. I like it.
But Rob, good. Tobacco Road, huh? Okay. Okay. Any other further discussion?
So we're leaving it.
Take some action? Or do you have enough direction on these changes?
Yeah, I think so. So as far as the materials, we're leaving it as is. Okay.
Okay.
I'm good with that. If council's good, I'm good.
cement fiber, Trex material, or actual wood.
Well, not Trex. No. What
No,
was
we're
the
not
three?
good on Trex. Forgive me. I thought we were okay with Trex.
It was
Forgive me.
wood, concrete, fiber, and what was the third one? There's wood, metal, and
Concrete fiber.
concrete fiber.
Metal. It's just like we have on our roofs where we changed the requirement, like on the accent metal roofs, that has to be standing seam. Okay? Not a nail down or a screw down or anything like that. Yeah. Okay.
Do you need the changes called out in the motion?
John, can we just say they approve the resolution with the changes as recommended by City Council?
That's fine.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to adopt Ordinance 1080 at its first reading, recommending approval of Zone Code Amendment 2021-04 and schedule the second reading on April 6, 2022, and adopt Resolution number 2022-18 to
Do it one at a time.
Oh, thank you.
And notwithstanding what it says here, correction, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Norco, California, approving Zone Code Amendment 20-21-04, amending chapters 18.02 definitions, 18.17 R3 low density multifamily residential, and 18.64 housing development overlay zone to be compliant with state law for projects that require ministerial approval, and to codify development guidelines/standards for projects in the housing development overlay zone, HDO.
Please vote.
So this vote also has adopt resolution.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know, that's what I said.
'Cause
that
I only-
said
I-
ordinance.
Yeah, it's ordinance, but our voting thing says
Yeah, and it will just be the one adoption. It is
ordinance
just for the
1080.
ordinance, and you're going to get a second vote for the
thank you.
rest.
Yeah, it's just that there's a typo in the ordinance in your packet which says resolution.
Okay. Councilmember Hoffman? I got it.
didn't pay attention in training.
Motion passes
Okay.
for the ordinance, and now I will send out for the resolution.
We need a motion on the resolution.
And a motion is
Go ahead, Catherine.
So I will move to adopt Resolution number 2022-18 with the discussed changes to approve objective development standards to be compliant with state law for projects that require ministerial approval, and to establish development guidelines and standards for projects in the housing development overlay zone.
Second.
Let me set. Sorry. Let me make sure. Okay. And the motion carries.
Thank you, Dana. Good job, Alma. Josh. Okay, item 6B. Hang on a second, Chad. This is ordinance number 1081, first reading, amending Norco Municipal Code. Go ahead, Chad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is items being brought back. We had a discussion back in September of 2021 regarding composting, and we're bringing this back because the state in SB 1383, which is their organics ordinance that they adopted 2016, one of the requirements is it does require that all municipal entities have to allow composting. Our current ordinance does not allow composting. So we initially in September last year came up with a very generic ordinance that really didn't have a lot of meat in it or substance. It just basically said you can compost and it also allowed us to basically administratively monitor it and to make determinations if there's issues related to smell or odor or vermin, etc. Council ultimately elected to not adopt that ordinance. They asked to have more substance to it and a little more meat to it in how we're going to apply the requirements of composting and how it would be enforced. So we went back to the drawing board and started researching other cities and jurisdictions. We quickly found out that most jurisdictions actually don't have composting ordinances. They have a lot of material on their websites that promote how to compost and good practices and BMPs, but not necessarily other than very short line items that says composting is acceptable. They don't have a lot of their own substance in their ordinances. We did find a few areas that help provide some material. So we helped develop what we try to do is a little generic ordinance that wasn't too complex and got into very detailed specifics, but highlighted key components and in developing that. As part of developing this, just to make council aware, we did utilize Patrick Mitchell and 5 Keys to review this ordinance to kind of get feedback whether or not staff who does not have experience in composting and that type of activity. So we wanted to get some independent feedback on that process, and Patrick was helpful in that and giving us some suggestions that we ultimately did provide and adopt including language in the ordinance. Briefly going through the ordinance, and I'm happy to talk about any particular item we have. We did want to highlight that as part of that, this would be changing the current Norco Municipal Code. It's 6.42300, which is composting. It will update the current language to help define, item A is define what composting is. Item B, which is the composting location, kind of talks about where it can be done, i.e. in a container system, in windrow, or in a defined area where you're putting up siding, so you kind of keep the material in one place based off of what you're going to do. Basically generic of what type of activities can be done and how that would be done. We talk about the size of that location, highlighting that if you are a property that is less than an acre, you can compost up to 20 cubic yards of material. If you're larger than an acre, you can compost 40 cubic yards. And again, those are arbitrary numbers. We kind of tried to look at what is manageable to do a composting. And so those are numbers that can be revised up or down depending on your preference, but it is something we thought would be applicable for the size lots that we have. And again, it's something that if we determine over time that it's either too restrictive for folks, or maybe it's causing too much problems because people are not doing it the right way, it's becoming more of a nuisance, we can always reduce things later on. So please don't feel that this is a in stone type of document. We can always change it as time goes on, but this is kind of where we stepped off and thought what might be appropriate. We define the location on the property, highlighting that we want to make sure it's at least 5 feet away from any property line and 20 feet away from any occupied building, so that you're not putting it right next to somebody's home that's against the yard. If somebody's house is right there, then you need to be at least 20 feet away, which may push you not 5 feet, but maybe 15 feet, or depending on where that house is next to the property line. So we want to at least try to put it in a reasonable area, but away from an adjacent person's domicile. We identify the type of materials that are acceptable, and then we also identify the type of materials that are not acceptable. We develop that area, again, talking with Patrick and his group. Actually, part of this time, I also worked with Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer, because she does composting through the school and even on her own property, and got a good idea of what works, what doesn't. So we modified this to make sure that it made sense, and to help facilitate people who wanted to do this, that they could do it appropriately, and using maybe the materials or the livestock that they are, the remnants from the livestock that they are raising on site. We talked about proper maintenance. Again, giving generic, not actual specifics, but generic ideas of what best practices are. We're planning to supplement this once it's adopted with information on the city's website that actually gives practical flyers and information of here's proper methodologies and showing whether it's pictures or information and more specifics, robust information for folks. We didn't want to put that meat in here because ideas may change, and we don't want to be changing this over time. So we'll focus on providing those best practice materials online to folks that want to do that. And again, Patrick Mitchell and his team have volunteered to help give and produce some of those flyers and review some of the ones we may gather to make sure they're highly focused and best for our community, and that we have these large lots of what people can do and be realistic and supporting what folks can do and should be doing as good practices. So we will provide the necessary educational materials, make sure that is out there. And then we do have the section there that talks about, the last one, about abatement. We do have the ability per the city's municipal code to handle nuisances in regards to dealing with, especially also including if it becomes an issue with manure. This is not intended to be a solution for folks who want to all of a sudden compost because they have manure. You can technically turn manure into compost, but you also have to then reuse it on your property, and we did make it an item on here that if you are producing any type of compost, if you want to donate it to somebody, you can donate it. We didn't set it up as an application or a process that you sell it. It's simply that if you're producing it more than you can produce, but you're doing a positive thing, and if you want to donate it to your neighbors or somebody wants to come pick it up, that's a positive thing. We want to promote that. But we did indicate that you can't take material from other residents to generate or create your own composting on your property. It's what you generate on site is what you can produce, and if you can't use it, you can certainly give it to others, and that's okay. But we do have a process in here that we can abate it. So if there are issues that we get complaints about smell or vector issues with insects or rats or other things that may come about because it's not being properly done, or if there's concerns for folks, it becomes, depending on how you stockpile this, and if you're bigger than you should be, if you're not doing it, composting piles can become flammable, and that's a concern too, to make sure that we are aware of that. But that's why we kind of want to limit the size of this process. But we do not have in here, it should be, we don't have a requirement for people to sign up for it. We don't have them, ask them to get a permit. It's just more of a personal activity that folks are doing at the home. So it's not a direct administrative process that we've started from the beginning, but we do have the ability in the back end, if issues arise, we have multiple ways of getting on property, requiring abatement, and be able to enforce that to make sure that it can be handled in appropriate methodology so that it doesn't become a problem. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Good report. Questions to staff? Kevin? Catherine?
Yes. So I didn't see that the ordinance defined like the type of composting. So for example, if I'm doing vermiculture and I have my worm composting bin, or if I have my compost enclosed in a tumbler, is that considered the same under this compost umbrella?
If you look at what is prohibited, is what I would indicate is whatever, if any of those items that you're concerned with are in the prohibited category, then I would say that they're not, those are the items that are most important to look at, is that is an excluded activity. So in this case, it doesn't mention worms, so that's, I would assume, is a fine activity.
Okay.
We didn't include, we highlighted some generalities, these are acceptable materials, but there might be others. We focus more on what is not acceptable. We didn't want the fats, oils, and greases.
Right.
We don't want people throwing carcasses in there, that kind of thing.
So my question, that question was leading to the setbacks. So my worm bin that I previously had was on my patio, because it needed to be in the shade, within 5 feet of my house, within 20 feet, right, of my house. My compost tumbler, same thing, was not 20 feet away because both of those are enclosed. It's not the same as having an open compost area. So that was my question in looking to this, because for me, when I look at that, I feel like I know what the setbacks are they're intended to do, especially with an open compost pile. But if your compost is enclosed, I would treat the setback differently and not say it has to be so far from your house.
Keep in mind, the setback is specific. It's 20 feet off of any habitable building off the subject property. So your property If you want to put it 5 feet from your house or against your house, you can do that. It's the adjacent neighbors that this is related to.
Okay.
So if you do have a property where you're close to your neighbor and you have it adjacent to, on your side of your house against it, but it happens to be within 20 feet, if it was let's say if it became a problem with smell or odor, we came out and said,
Yeah.
well,
If somebody
unfortunately, you're not
complains.
within the requirement. You need to move it to a new location. But that's the reality is you technically it could become an issue, but it's meant to protect the
Okay.
other property, not necessarily your house. You can put it
I read it
where
wrong.
you want.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank
okay,
you.
thank you.
Robin?
Yeah, Chad, just clarification on page 2 of the ordinance, letter C at the top. The written word does not match the number in the parentheses. So
Yep.
can we, okay, so it is, but we are in both of those going with the actual written number in the parentheses,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah, that's an error. We'll change it to
Okay,
20.
perfect. So that's,
And the other one has to be 40. So that was just copy and paste, and I didn't change it. So that's my
okay,
apologies.
perfect. So yeah, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Ted?
Just a question on this. The information that you got for the sizes and things, and that came from Mr. Mitchell, correct?
No, I mean, it was just researching online, kind of seeing what few information was about sizes, and it was just a guesstimate of what would be appropriate. And I honestly used Robin's home. She's got I think a 35.
Don't out me as a lawbreaker right now, Chad.
You're doing it right. So again, it's what do we think it should be?
Well, and I understand, and that's how we get things approved, and that's why when you said you couldn't find anything, and then I went through the Riverside County Department of Waste Resources, and they do. They got it. I know it's a little cute little book handout. It tells you everything, but they even go through the state on their recycling program have sizes for bins compared to the sizes of properties, and they do that. So that's what I'm trying to get at here on this is that if we come through with this ordinance, it's similar to what we did with the space for the horse. Is we utilize the University of California, Davis for that information when they did their study for stabling horses. Someone has done this study in the state or in the county level that tells you about the sizes of these bins that are required as far as your space of your land and how much you're going to throw in there. So I would rather have it to make sure we use an authoritative section in if we're going to tell people what sizes they're going to use or they're not going to use. Because that way it shows, hey, we did some research or someone's done research. And their major thing was the leaching out as the composting goes through. And that's the one thing is the contamination of the soil from the leaching. And that's what they were worried about. And then the other thing growing up, and this is something that, I talked about growing up in the dairy business, 2 kinds of fires. The manure fire and the hay fire. And I'm going to go back to the chief. Chief, just that question, you're going to have compost bins, I'll let you up here. Compost bins, and I'm not going to say throughout the city, but they're going to be compost bins in the city. Your thoughts on this as far as you're the responding agency and internal combustion hits?
So I see where you're going, Councilmember Hoffman. As you all know, spontaneous combustion, that this whole process we're talking about, it's based on, I'm not a scientist, but it's based on heat to break down and decompose the organic matter. Naturally, as your division or deputy chief, we want to limit any potential cause of an incident, but we're bound by the Senate Bill 1383 that it's being mandated. So I think Chad has got a good start. Cal Recycle, I think that's where you were going a second ago, has information on composting. But given the situation that it's the law now, I think we use 2 elements of our goals of our prevention program. We overwhelm it with information and education. For example, our town hall meetings. as we come into spring, maybe dedicate one of them to fire prevention. Weed abatement. Fire season is going to be early this year. We say that every year in Southern California, and there is no fire season. It's year round, as you know, but perhaps we dedicate a portion of that to composting, safe practices. I'm not a big fan of it, but I understand it is part of our learning process, like Robin does with the students. So we're just going to have to deal with it, and deal with it as safely as we can. Something I wish I wish I would have got an opportunity to speak to it, or our agency perhaps. But as you know, here in Norco, in the Northwest area, we live in the wind channel. So we have single-digit humidities, which is a driving element or potential for haystack fires when we used to have dairy lands or manure piles. And years ago, for anyone that wasn't around here, that was a huge issue where Eastville currently sits now. So fortunately, a lot of those issues have gone away. But bringing it back around, we want to prevent any opportunity for a new fire or new source. So we do need to, just to reiterate, overwhelm it with information, education, and then look to code enforcement and our inspectors. Where the designated locations for the composting areas would be, it's going to become even more critical now that code and fire maintain our weed abatement. We can't have junk piles. That's just, you're prompting a major incident. And we have too many of those in the Northwest, not necessarily here in Norco, but in our surrounding areas. And we got to pull that back by good fire prevention and information education.
Okay, and this leads to my other question. This isn't going, and I'm not trying to have people pull permits to do composting, but is there any type of notification system or thing that we could use that would benefit you if you knew such an address, you hear a fire, you're going through, coming out of 123 Main Street, and boom, hey, well, that's a site of a compost pile, that type of thing. I don't know how that you guys work together on that or anything like that, or even if there is such a thing, but this is all new. And you would know when you responded out the dairies, you knew you had either a manure fire or a haystack fire because that was what you're heading for. But if you go into somebody's backyard, and I'm going to take, for example, the situation occurred in Harupa with the amount of horses that were killed, and a lot of that was due, inaccessible, was because of the debris and the large amounts of manure there. And it helped fuel that fire. How do you guys know who has, or is there anything in place that you would want out of this? Since like we're creating this, is a notification that who has a compost pile in their backyard and at certain residences. Is that something that's going to benefit you?
I not necessarily so. If they were required to pull a permit, which Chad, clearly stated they would not have to pull a permit, we would be able to track them, and know where they're at. And as part of the permit, provide conditions like we would for a new building or something like that here in town. But absent having them pull a permit, which I seriously doubt the city would want to go down that road when it's required by law for all residential and commercial organic waste to have this composting opportunity. I think it's a situation that we just, I don't want to repeat, but go right back to, we've got to educate our community members to do it safely. And to be alerted of their locations. Folks are already doing it now. It's not a problem now, but if we stay ahead of keeping them informed and how safe practices, I think would be our best way to go about it.
Okay, those are my concerns, and I appreciate that.
Bet.
So yeah, thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. So like I said, my whole point in that was to alert somebody because the potentials there, we're creating another source of potential fire. That's what it is, because the way what composting is. So, but like I said, my other thing is when we do this is to make sure that the source we have, even if Mr. Mitchell helped you on this, he probably had a source of the material, at least somebody doing this study. And that's the only thing I would like to do is be able to go back in our ordinances says that this following information, or even something that would qualify the information we put out to the public. And even if Councilmember Grunmeyer has it, it's fine. Just to an authority section, from an institute or something like that. That's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Going to go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have any cards?
We have one speaker card, Patrick Mitchell.
Good evening.
Thank you again for the opportunity to talk on this. I think this is a huge step for our city. I think it's a reasonable ordinance. Some of the issues you've talked about, Ted, are those fires are coming from manure piles, not necessarily compost piles. If you're working a compost pile, you're controlling the heat, you're controlling any of those kinds of issues that might cause a problem. And I think this ordinance deals with that when it talks about the size you can have. The runoff issues are dealt with by, making sure you've got some kind of a prevention at the base. So if there is rain or anything like that, you're preventing some of that from running off. And the other thing is that from a perspective as a farmer, compost is the #1 soil amendment for organic agriculture. It's preventing me, if we're concerned about things like runoff and contamination, I'm not having to put chemical poisons on my plants to control weeds. I'm not feeding them synthetic fertilizers. I'm using compost for that, and that's my primary source of nutrient for my farm operation. And so I really think that this ordinance is general enough that it allows it, but it gives enough guidance to folks that it can be done safely. I also would say that over the next several months at the EAT Center, we will start to offer composting workshops on both the tumbler and container style as well as windrow style composting. And in that will include how you maintain the heat, how do you make sure that you're eliminating pathogens, weed seeds, all of those kinds of things in your compost. So I think this is a great start, and I look forward to continuing to work to see this move forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have no further public comment.
Thank you, Dana. We'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council for discussion and action. Robin?
So I just want to address a couple of things, and since I've been outed by staff that I'm a lawbreaker anyways. So a couple of things. The compost bin in question, alleged compost bin in question, has been in place, over 20 years. Was started by my parents, and when I spoke to my dad and told him before I started renting the property that he was breaking the law, he said, "That's ridiculous. I took a composting class when I moved to Norco, and they told us how to do it. Why would they outlaw it?" And so going through the discussions with him and looking at what we have, ours does hold the 40 cubic yards. It does have a cement bottom to prevent the runoff. When we're talking about a composting bin that big, that is not a hand shovel, turn and go hose off once in a while. You're using a tractor. You have to have the appropriate equipment to do that. And then just like Patrick mentioned, all of that material is used back in the raised beds that we have to promote lawn growth on the property and those types of things. So we're reusing. I did ask that it be donated if necessary in the ordinance, as Chad noted, because there's a lot of it that goes back to the agriculture department at Norco High School as well to be used. Again, you're amending the soil and bringing the soil back to health without using chemicals or other additives in the soil. My concern with what Councilman Hoffman brought up is the potential restrictions of using a document like that, because I think about the production ag that I have at my house. I'm raising 80 turkeys. there's a lot of manure with 80 turkeys for that time of year, but poultry manure is one of the best manures for using for composting. And so reusing that is good, but I think if we were to go by, I can only have a tumbler, I can only do this or that, it's going to be severely restricted. And I don't know that, the production agriculture that's possible on some of our properties would necessarily be addressed by a document like that, because I just don't think there's the expectation that that kind of agriculture would be taking place on a small plot of land. And so, I went through this proposed ordinance several times, and Chad and I went back and forth, and I finally confessed to Chad that I was breaking the law just a couple of weeks ago, I think, when we were talking about measurements and trying to figure out what would work for the size of these particular composting bins. So I just feel like a couple people have said, it's a good start. We're probably going to find a few spots where we need to tweak a few things. But I think we've tried to address where we don't want people just piling up horse manure, for example. We've tried to address, we don't want our neighbors smelling things. But again, I go back to, if you're composting correctly, you're not going to smell anything and have those nuisances anyways. So I really do think that staff put in a lot of time and effort to get this to where if somebody, is just taking lawn clippings and food scraps from their half acre, that they could do that. Or if somebody's crazy and raising 80 turkeys for Thanksgiving, that they can, take care of that as well. So I think there's a lot of flexibility here, and it's well written. So that's all I have.
Catherine? Kevin? Ed?
Well, Robin, we do agree. Believe it or not. Because in my last ag alert with the current situation in Russia and Ukraine, we're hurting on the chemical nitrogen supply. And our dairy farmers up in the Central Valley and everywhere else, guess what they got a call from? Give me your manure and the mulch and everything. So it is an important asset. We may just, this situation in Europe may have just changed us back to go back 50 years, where you'll see the natural compost and you'll see the organics back in the ground where they should be. Again, my concern is if something happens or goes wrong, is that we can go back to just a legitimate, or somebody says, I'm an expert, and use that kind of a quality thing. So when MPDES, and that's their big thing, comes in there and says, hey, your guys are polluting because of your, they complain about the horse manure. And so now we're big composting. I don't think everybody's going to compost, but those that do, we don't want to give them an opportunity to jump on us on it. So that we did through, and we followed these rules. And that was my whole point. We don't need another agency, another state agency coming down and trying to restrict what we're trying to do in keeping our lifestyles. And that was my big thing, is at least if somebody says, hey, I'm from the University of Riverside and you guys are just doing good over here, and I'm from the Ag Extension, you guys, and just bless it. And that's it. So maybe as we go through and we get this up and running, if somebody wants to come from UC Extension program and say, you know what, Ms. Grandma, you're doing an excellent job. We're going to bless what you do. We'll write a paper on it, and it'll be good. And that was my whole point. So, but I'm for it. So, thank you.
Is that a recommendation then, Ted?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to
Second.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, amending Norco Municipal Code Section 6.42.300, composting to allow composting on residential properties, Code Amendment 2022-02.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll move into city council staff communications. City staff have anything to report? Dana.
I just want to say thank you to everybody for being patient with the voting system and the iPads, and we're working it out tonight. Me and Matt have been working together to figure out what's going on and why there's some delays. So thank you all for being patient. We're doing this for our community. We're making sure that we're more efficient and more transparent. So we've got some bumps, but we're getting there. So thank you all. And then also don't forget to bring your shredding. The city clerk's office will be out on the 26th there as usual with their big shredding trucks. So get it loaded up and get rid of those documents. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Good job, Matt. Chad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple updates regarding some street projects. Just to make sure council's aware and the public, we've already sent out a notice regarding a closure that's going to occur on 2nd Street at Hamner Avenue. This is part of the widening project that has been going on for the last year at that section in front of the commercial center there. This is one of the final elements. Now that they finally they're going to move the pole over. They're going to remove that radius that's there, but they have to do the cross gutter. In order to do the cross gutter, they need to have no traffic over it because they can't plate it safely. So what they're going to do is do half the street going eastbound. So all eastbound traffic from Friday night at 8 o'clock until Sunday at 5 will not be available. They're going to have a ton of different delineation out there and signage in every direction, and also providing detour routes for people to let them know to not go through. You're not going to be able to go eastbound. You can technically go through the center and still use the on-ramp, etc., but eastbound movement will not be available through that area through this weekend. And then a subsequent weekend, just people where we're going to flip to the other side, do the cross gutter. On the other half of the road, we'll have the similar situation where the westbound movement will not be available. For right now, we're focused on the eastbound side to try to get this project, closer to fruition. Also, to give an update, Narconian is likely being paved tomorrow. Hopefully, within the next 10 days or so, it'll actually be officially open, if not sooner. But the paving tomorrow, they're going to be doing miscellaneous work on some other work that's along the roadway they're doing. But as far as it will be open sooner rather than later, which is a good thing. I know that's been an interest for a lot of folks for a while. And then we have completed a majority of the work on Hillside Avenue between 5th and 6th. If you haven't gone down there, it's turned out very well. We're doing some final touch-up things on various items. As a follow-up to that, just so the council's aware, because it was a discussion about the tree planting there, we did get some quotes from Nova as far as the cost to put in the irrigation system. The trees would come from our grant program, but we're bringing that as a request to the Measure R Commission as adding it as a project at our meeting next week. And then we'll bring it back to council for approval, assuming Measure R approves that as a project. We'll bring it to council at the next available council meeting so that we can add that as a sample project of what we hope maybe we do in the future for other locations of adding more of our trees back to our community that we've unfortunately had to eliminate. So I at least want to make sure we are working on that aspect, on that process, and it hopefully will go forward in the next month to where we have that as officially adopted as a project that we want to fund, assuming it's something council decides to do when it's brought to your attention. And I have not forgotten about the request from Councilwoman Alleman. I'm working on the number of trees. I'm getting some misinformation from the contractor, but once I have that, I will email that information to the council to tell you how far we've gotten in the tree planting process. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chad. City Attorney? City Manager? Ted?
Michelle, and I don't know if is that March 30th? Are we doing that bench dedication? Get on and off. Is that?
Yes, that will be going out. It'll be 7 a.m. and that will be going out for an appointment. Kelly will be sending that out.
Okay, I saw it come through on my.
Oh, you
phone.
did? It already came through?
Well, it was a request for that date. So.
Oh, she's waiting to find out if it works for all of you.
Okay, I just was curious because we don't have another council meeting until then. And then so, and just tomorrow morning, thank you. And then just so tomorrow morning, I get to get up early at 6:30 and have breakfast with the Corona Chamber as far as guests from the Riverside County Transportation Commission, where I get to listen to Supervisor Spiegel in the state of the county. So, thank you.
Robin? Catherine?
I mean, should we do a red ribbon cutting for Norconian Drive? We're gonna keep it on just everyone who's been emailing about it for the last to select list. That's all. Thank you.
Kevin?
I'm not sure how to approach this. As I was walking down a street, I noticed that there was what I thought was an illegal RV building, and it was 5 feet from the property line, obviously out of compliance, except that it was attached to a house, which made it, now the way I read the code, it's not legal, but apparently it's legal. And so really what it was an end run. And so it literally is a 16-foot high siding, and it's 5 feet from a property line. So I would like maybe the planning commission or somebody to look at that, because we will see more and more of those. But that is, our code says in the spirit of the code. And so I'm just it's huge. It's a huge building. It's bigger than the house, but it's attached. So I think that we need to nip those things in the bud. So maybe send it back to, what do I do, John? Do I ask for a motion to send it back? You're taking it back already? All right, great. Well, that's all I have. Thanks.
Good. Okay. With that, thank you all. We're adjourned.